Two or three. Welcome, members of council, staff, and members of the community to the recess meeting of the Committee of Whole, January the 8th, 2018, and January the 15th. We will now be reconvened, and it's been moved by Councillor Kersey. Any changes or additions? Any? Saying none. All in favor? Okay. All right, at this point, I'd like to turn the meeting back to Madam Treasurer, if you may continue.
Mr. Chair. So in continuing from our discussion last time, there's four slides that I have put on everyone's desk, and we're going to continue from there. So the first one that we have here is the capital budget, and we had some questions last time with regards to specific grants and, you know, how are some of these projects being funded. So we thought it would be helpful to summarize the projects with the grants. So if you, under the last sheet under tab 1, you'll see the summary of the grants. So in the first column, it's 2.3 million. So this ties into the original grants, the original submission of the total grants that we have for capital. The second column, the next column after total grants is long-term agreements and approved grants. These are the known grants. So we have envelopes of money coming from the federal government, the provincial government, like the federal gas tax and the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, that we know how much money we're receiving. All that we need to do is to allocate projects that are eligible for those funds. Sometimes, you know, when we do the budget process, we allocate a few projects. When we submit them in the application, they'll say, no, you know, we don't think it's eligible. Can you pick something else? So we'll pick something else from our list. But in the end, it's always the total of what's been approved. So the 843,232, that number is known as grants we are going to be receiving this year for sure. The next column is grants pending application or approval. So these grants here, some of them we have submitted applications in, some of them we haven't. So for example, the $1.2 million, the Osa Top-Up Grant, we submitted that back in September. We're hoping to hear some news by the end of January. That's what the ministry has said, whether we receive that grant or not. And some of the other grants, we're in the process of actually applying for them. So our assumption is if we don't receive the grants, we don't move forward with the projects. And then there is the next column is grants that are not approved. So since we met last week, we just confirmed that these grants here are not being approved. They have not been approved. One is $3,000 for cycling, and that one has not been approved. The next two are from the region that pertain to wastewater. And so this one here, we're going to look at the 30,000, 80,000 when we bring forward the wastewater budget to see if we could fund it through the reserves of that budget. So right now it's not grant funding from the region. We were hoping it would be, but they confirmed that it's not. And so we're going to see if we could fund it through reserves, because these are two things that needs to get done. So this is an update here on the grants. And are there any questions on this?
Comments or questions from members of council? No. Mr. Mayor?
Thanks very much. I'll have to check, but I recall that we did get some funding from the region on some of those things. So I'll have to check with that. When we approve the region's budget,
we have
the projects we had. So
yes, through you, Mr. Chair, we have. If you look at WSTO 318, there's $70,000 there for the Welland treatment plant. That's the report. It's like the master plan for. Andrew, can you explain that better? I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the $70,000 that we're anticipating from the CSO program is towards a pollution prevention control plan that we would piggyback with the City of Welland, so that together we would continue to be eligible for CSO funding with that control plan in place.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I don't know if it was that or something, there was something, I'll have to check into it,
Okay.
that the region approved. I'll check into that as well. And we did get a grant, or a notice of a grant, from $50,000 was announced, so we'll have to figure out where that
That's the
goes.
Main
It's for,
Street
it's for,
revitalization.
yeah, downtowns and Main Street, et cetera, so.
Yes, you sent us notice of that. Where would the money be designated?
That's not in here right now, because that was just a new announcement that
Okay,
came from the
that's fine.
province. But we can look at some of the capital costs that we have that maybe that grant could be applied against, or maybe there's something specific on Main Street, on the main strip that we want to do that right now we haven't budgeted for. So it's $50,000 our allocation.
Yeah.
You, Madam Treasurer, anybody, is that 50,000 matching funds, or is it just a pure?
No, it's not
50?
matching,
Okay, thank
which
you.
is good.
Any other questions? Just a quick one, the Pelham Street storm and road construction. We will know whether or not our grant's been approved in the next 2 weeks?
They're saying by the end of January, so by next week,
And if that's the case, then we would proceed for this fiscal year.
yes.
And if not, we'll have to table it.
Well, we actually have till December 31st of 2019. So
Okay.
we don't have to do it in this fiscal year, but we have to make sure it's completed by that.
It's good for
So that gives
clarity.
us lots of time for tendering and getting some really good prices.
So it gives us time, in
Yes.
fact, to work out. Any other questions on this particular sheet? Okay, let's move on. Next,
Okay.
Madam Treasurer.
This is the proposed budget reductions. Council has requested that staff go back and look at a 3.5% increase in total. The budget we brought forward was a 5% property tax increase after growth, and that was at 589,337. So in order to reach a 3.5% increase, we would have to reduce the proposed budget by 177,000. And then the other number that was brought forward was 3%, and that would be a reduction of 236,000. So we met as the senior team, and we met quite a few times actually to go through, where can we find these savings. And we're bringing forward a list here, which is also in your package, of some of the proposed reductions. So this one here, the total of this list equals the 177,000, and this will bring the operating budget down to 3.5%. So I'd like to go through each one in detail, and you can stop me after each one. The first one we talked about, this is the decrease in benefits insurance from the Industrial Alliance. So when we did the budget before December, we projected an increase of about 7%. This is what the Industrial Alliance, what they said it would be. And then since then, we were updated that it's no longer going to be an increase, actually be a slight decrease. So that 42,000 is just coming off the top. The next one is decrease in employee benefits. We are currently out for an RFP on our employee benefits. It's the provider. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. As I had mentioned, once benefits were moved over to the HR department, we started to do some investigating and doing our reading and things like that. And we're moving a little bit quicker than I had anticipated, but again, we want to make sure that we do the right thing for 2018. And I have found that there's a number of advisors out there who are doing very innovative and creative things that will allow us to decrease the cost that the town pays for benefits without impacting the benefits that we provide to our staff. So I'm very excited to say that the benefits would remain whole, but the administrative things that we pay for, such as booklets and their own internal processes, we'd be able to see a savings in. So our RFP does close tonight. I am very excited with the companies that I know so far who have submitted, and I think we're going to have some good results to share with you.
Any questions on that? Just quickly through to you, Madam Director. So what is anticipated, that there would be some potential savings, and then that would be incorporated into the final budget amount? Is that what I would understand?
Yes,
Right.
that is correct.
So at this point, we don't know,
No.
but that would be part of any, how can I say, efficiencies that we attract. Is fair to say? Okay, thank you. Madam Treasurer?
Yeah, the next couple items. So One of the things we looked at with regards to the community center, we looked at the staffing and the discussion that we had with the senior team. I think, you know, as far as trying to balance the budget, we feel that, you know, I think it was just a bit, maybe just too tight as far as the staffing, and do we have some of the key positions that we need to have there? And so we looked at the first one here at the info desk. And we thought, you know, for a community of that size and people coming in, you've got, you know, seniors and young kids coming there, it really does make sense that there's someone there to greet people and to answer questions and to help people. So we're looking at staffing the info desk with part-time staff, and this is looking at hours between 3:30 and 10, Monday to Friday, and 9 to 5 for Saturday and Sunday. And so that is about 1,400 hours of staffing that we think will really provide very good customer service to the community center. So that's one that so this is actually an increase. So as we're looking at reductions, we also said, you know, let's also sit back and say, does it make sense what we put forward? And let's, you know, if we need to put something back in, this is the time for us to do it, and this is what we did. The next one is the part-time casual labor, and that's $53,000. And this is where, you know, once again, we felt that there needs to be someone in the building, at least 2 people in the building from opening to close, and this is on a part-time basis that would cover the hours between 8:30 and 12, just because of the size of the building. You need to have people there that are there to help people. And so we have 3,480 hours at $14 an hour. That makes up the $53,000 that we're looking for casual part-time labor. There was a decrease in material and supplies in the community center, just looking at our numbers again, and we were able to decrease it by $15,000. The other one is part-time event labor, and this is, you know, we looked at all of the different events that we have and the staff that we're currently using to help set up, you know, pick up the garbage, and we're using full-time staff, and then a lot of it is going into overtime. And so we're saying, does that make sense? Are there certain duties that, you know, we could bring in part-time staff at a much lower rate that can do some of the functions that can help the events out? So we're looking at about 809 hours of part-time event labor help for the events. And the next one is the part-time records management coordinator. This was in the 2017 budget. As you're aware, we've purchased the software system for records management, and we had a position that was earmarked last year to help with the implementation. Right now, we're looking at, as opposed to staffing it full-time, we're looking at staffing it part-time to help with the implementation of the records management system. So if you look at all that, I did a subtotal of the net salaries, benefits, and PCC changes from our last discussion, and it's a reduction of $2,500. And then the other items to help with the reduction is an increase in the transit grant. We've got some information about the transit grant, and we feel comfortable to increase it by $10,000. Supplemental revenue, we feel comfortable to increase it by $50,000 from the original budget. The budget right now is sitting at $250,000. This year's actual is about $370,000. So we were a bit conservative. We feel that next year we could probably go to $300,000 for the supplementals. So we increased it to that number. We talked about, you know, allocating some of the snow removal to the water wastewater budget. As you're aware, that is a self-contained budget, and there is a portion of that really should go to that budget. And so we estimate about $50,000 to move the cost from the operating to the water wastewater budget. Decreasing the tree planting, the original budget was $40,000, and we looked at decreasing about half, about $20,000 to help with the cost savings. The other one is decreased municipal grants. There's $60,000 of municipal grants, and we looked at decreasing it as an option of $34,500. And then the last one is to eliminate the contracted services for the gypsy moth, and that's $10,000. So that's the 1.5% reduction, which equals $177,000.
Council questions, Councilor Vang.
Yeah, just a question on the snow removal going to wastewater. Does that mean that'll come out of the wastewater reserve rather than, or is it just going to
No,
go
it's
to
come
that
out of the
account?
operating budget.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Ribbiak and then Councillor, or Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Talk about decreasing municipal grants by 34,500. Can you illustrate that a little bit? What would happen as a result of that reduction?
Well, there'd just be less funds that would be available to be distributed.
Yeah, I think I got that.
This
Who
is-
would receive less? I mean, is that the budget that we have as council
Yes,
to?
yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
that's your
that's
budget.
what that's,
So that is the permissive grants,
yeah.
right? That's
okay.
what it's, that's what we mean, right? Those
Well,
that we
used to be
allocate to.
permissive grants, yeah.
Sorry, Councillor, I didn't mean to, that's
No,
what
no,
I wanted to
but-
be clear on what that meant.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that clarifies it. It's what used to be permissive grants.
Right.
And we've got the system now, and the proposal is to reduce that by 34,000, from 60, I think you said.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, I understand that.
Mr. Mayor?
Thanks very much. I'm trying to reconcile the positions with the chart, and I met with, along with Councillor Lane, actually happened to be in the building, so we met with the Director of HR yesterday and asked for a chart kind of with the recommendation based on where it's at. So I want to understand. So one of them, information desk customer service, part-time, I presume that's this receptionist cashier that's in the bottom, is it the same?
So I'm
Can we,
the
can we,
HR
I guess
director. Yes.
the issue is, this uses one type of language or title, and this uses a different, so can we just reconcile the two and call them the same thing?
Yeah, so I'm just,
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I don't know where our treasurer chose her titles.
All right, and she probably doesn't know where you chose yours, so let's just figure this
I
out.
just-
Can
I
we
just
figure
thought
out
we'd go
the
through your
information
chart.
desk
I mean,
customer
this is the
service?
titles that we talked about at SMT, so.
Okay, is that the receptionist cashier one?
Right.
Information desk customer service part-time reps?
Yes, that is correct. And through you, Mr. Chair, if I may, I certainly didn't mean to sound flippant, except that again, in only the tax representative has been using standard language. Our treasurer's changed language. I don't know where she got her changed language from.
From the senior
Something
management
should
team discussions, but,
Okay,
yeah.
can we hear about the next one, this casual part-time labor? What is that on here? Is that the operators or the,
Good question.
That's the event laborers.
well, then we have event laborers down below.
Correct?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, what we've done essentially is just the hours that were budgeted for the event laborers to work in the building. We've just increased their budget to schedule them more. So it's the same 6 potential part-timers that we would plan to hire that would support functions inside the building as well as functions outside the building. So it's one group of labor used in 2 different places.
Mr. Mayor, carry on.
Sorry, so it says on this chart, and it's up there, part-time event laborer. Is that the same as the event laborers on this chart?
Through Mr. Chair, yes, sir, that is
Okay.
correct.
Then what about the casual part-time labor, the 53? Is that,
Event laborer.
Well, the casual part-time labor are the people that are gonna be focused on, in the community center from opening to close to support the community center. The 12,000 specifically is the staff that, the events that the rec department is doing, that the staff is there helping the rec department with, supper market, Summerfest, other activities that are happening outside of the rec area. And maybe some inside too, depends on the programming.
So where are they?
So if I have a confused look on my face, forgive me. The event laborers would be ones that would be hired over and above for the specific event, is that what I understand?
Yes. Yep.
And then the other 53,000, sorry, Mr. Mayor, this casual part-time labor, is that everyone that we see under custodial
it's the one that you see under event laborers.
So between the two of them, casual part-time labor and event labor, we're looking at roughly 2,200 hours?
I'm sorry, the hours, you mean?
Yeah, the casual part-time labor, who are these people?
Casual part-time labor is 3,480 hours, and the part-time event labor to help with the exterior, the other events are 809 hours.
Okay, so forgive my simplistic mind. The casual part-time laborers, who exactly are these people? What responsibilities?
Through you, Mr. Chair, going back to my presentation last week.
Right.
These are the people that we called event laborers. So this is the one person on the warm side or the community center side of the building that will set up rooms,
Right.
answer questions, cleans washrooms, wipe spills, et cetera, et cetera. We'll have one person in the building from open to close,
Right.
7 days a week. We've now added in extra hours, so those folks, because again,
Okay.
it's a labor pool of 6, only scheduled to a maximum of 20 hours a week. So that's also their labor pool that when we have festivals and events going on, we can offer them additional hours working outside at our different festivals and events. So it's the same group of people that we'll be pulling
I'm
from.
confused. Okay. Mr. Mayor, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Well, so
I'm-
does that mean that
Right.
on this chart versus this chart, they're the same people? Like the same category here on this chart, is that right? Okay, that's helpful.
Yes, sir.
With the same category.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Mayor?
Not at this moment,
All right,
thank you.
good, we'll come back. Councillor Kane?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Can you just clarify eliminating the contracted services for the gypsy moth? I understand what elimination means, and I understand what contracted services means. But what I want clarified is whether that means that we will no longer deal with that issue, or that will be dealt with in-house per se.
Madam Engineer?
Through you, Mr. Chair, you remember this came up several times last summer with issues from the local residents?
Yes.
And the final direction from council was to include an amount to start, to restart the treatment, since we hadn't done it in some time, since 2009, I want to say.
Yeah.
It wasn't included in operating budget for some time, so it was to re-include an amount, so we had quotations to say from here on out, let's put a proper amount to have contracted services come and treat the trees in question. So that first draft of the operating budget included that amount based on the quotes. What we were saying with going back and reviewing numbers and seeing how we can get to that 3.5%, is this a service that could be considered and to not be offered? So we don't treat internally, we don't have the means or the internal services to do any treatment. It's what we have done in the past, is not treat. This would be not being able to offer any contracted services for this year, should that be selected.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Ribbiak and then Councillor Durley?
Thank you. Just going back to event labor, if I may, just so I understand it. As I see it, I guess an event would be something put on by somebody that produces some revenue for us. In the accounting for the event, do we not include kind of the costs, including the costs of this event labor? I'm wondering whether having the event labor separated from the events and the budgets for the event and the revenue to cover the cost of the event is the best way to go. Shouldn't the event be self-supportive in effect and cover the cost of any labor associated with it? I don't know. I'm looking for information with regard to that.
To you,
Madam
Mr.
Director?
Chair, what you've been presented is the budget that we require for events or times that we'll need to provide that support without necessarily having a corresponding revenue. So again, for example, when you think about the warm side of the community center with the walking track and people just milling about, it's our transit hub, we're not paying admission to go in, so we don't have an offsetting revenue to offset that labor. So that's a cost of doing business, we're gonna have to have that in. However, to that point, should we get an event where it's a play or a wedding, or they're going to need tables and chairs set up, then yes, absolutely, we'll be able to build in the cost of that labor, so it does get covered by the event. But these hours that we're presenting to you now are our estimate that we need to run the community center safely with that one person from open till close, as well as to support garbage takeout and general cleanup. And I might just turn to our director of RCW at our supper markets, Thursday night experiences, and things like that. So again, things that aren't necessarily tied to our revenue that we can offset it.
Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, excuse me. Yes, it is. We always need laborers to assist with garbage and so forth, and we normally take that from the Public Works pool, and it's always a struggle, and it ends up being an overtime issue. So RCW, the events, we don't have enough hours to have a pool on its own, because you'd never keep consistent staff. But if we're able to use the pool that's been in the community center, they're familiar with what we do, we can make sure that their hours don't go over the 20 hours a week as scheduled, and we have more of a pool.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Councilor Rivera?
Thank you. So I just, what I'm hearing is that when we call it event labor, it's not necessarily events. It's just a pool that's available for events and for other things. And I guess for want of a better term, we call it event labor, but it's not really attached to events.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's certainly a title that, we continue to ruminate on, because again, we want to capture what it does, and it does support events, but it does also do just general work. If you consider opening up the PCC on a daily basis, I know that's not an event, but we will figure out that's more of the working title, if I may.
Okay.
Okay, Councilor Durley?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, and to either one or both, all of these increases fall within, equal to, or less than what our pro forma showed the
Yes,
numbers that we
and
needed to
we
have?
have the pro forma on the last slide to show you what the impact of these increases are to the pro forma, yes.
Okay. Look forward to seeing that. Thank you.
Anything else, Councilor?
No, that's it for now. That's all for now. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So typically, every year we hire a bunch of summer students. And when we hold the summertime events, Canada Day, Summerfest, the Grasson, Fenwick, all of those sort of events, we typically use the summer students. How do they fall into this picture here? Are they part of these event laborers?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, they are over and above. So just to give you some historical context, in the past, our Parks Department or beautification had an approved budget to hire 5 from first week of May until just before Labor Day, so last week of August. The department would save some of their operating budget from other projects in order to bring that number up to 7. So for the last couple of years, they've been able to hire 7 students in order to do that. In addition, they also get augmented by our facilities operators, who typically in the summer come out of the arena and they help mow and clean trails and do all that. This year, we won't have that added support of the facilities operator coming out. So our parks folks will be working on, or our beautification will be working on their beautification areas. And they are scheduled pretty much a full schedule. I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Public Works if she wants to add to that.
Madam Engineer?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. So part of the backfill for pulling the required staff into the PCC with the proposed staffing there means that the cushion we had from facility staff during the summer months to be able to help with preparing fields for baseball, soccer, tree maintenance, garden maintenance, cemeteries, all of that. We've lost that because of, at least in the first year, we're not able to have the full-time and permanent part-time facility staff able to do that double duty. So the backfill, rather than recommending we hire staff to backfill, we thought we'd start with an increase in the student from the 5 to 10. We've actually been able to get by in the last couple of years to scrape budget, like Paula had mentioned, for 8, so that we could get the work done just through savings in other areas. So it was time to say, okay, how many do we actually typically use? And we changed that number now to 10 in the ask to do that backfill, so that we know the continuing service level from beautification won't change. Pool maintenance, baseball, soccer field maintenance, passive park maintenance. It was about us trying to maintain the current service levels without adding to a seasonal type of demand for public works staff.
Councilor Kersey?
Okay. Mr. Chair, through you, regarding the information desk customer service part-time rep, why could we not consider using volunteers for this service? We have seniors who are always looking for involvement with the community. They'd be great, people to greet, people entering it. Kids are always looking for community hours from high school. If they were properly shown what to do, they certainly could do that. And I think having a staff member there, most of our staff work until 4 o'clock or 4:30, so we're covered until 4:30. With the intranet and internet, the way things are, I think we'd be more than covered and could save $23,000 on having to pay someone to sit there at the information desk. So anybody want to comment on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely something that we continue to talk about, and I'm probably going to turn it over to our Director of RCW in just a moment. I will speak to the part of if we have volunteers, they won't be able to do the full functions. So again, we prefer our own staff to handle things like cash, for example. So we would have to have other avenues if people are coming in for a late night to pay for, whether it's a skate or a basketball event or something we're going on. These aren't insurmountable. These are absolutely things that we can find workarounds for. So yes, that's definitely not a problem. Volunteers is not my area of expertise. I'll turn it over to our Director of RCW to talk about volunteer staffing.
Through you, Mr. Chair. As you know, we do have volunteer programs that we are hitting hard right now, and as well as we have the Seniors Ambassador program that we're hoping to implement for the PCC. These are all programs that we are going to be initiating and growing, and in the future it would be ideal that we could have that info welcome center staffed from early morning until 9 o'clock at night with just community-minded people. That is a goal that I hope to accomplish. From the get-go, I'm not sure if we can do it. But in growing the program, I'm sure that we will have access to more and more volunteers. What we do have to keep in mind are the duties, that the way the community center is set up, that is the main focal point, that is the core of that community center right there. And we want to make sure that people come in, they know where they're going, they can pay for what they want, they can book what they want, and also have the volunteer beside them, because it would be great to have peak hours, that we would have staff, which was $23,000 is not a lot of staff time. That is just peak time. But during the day, we'll have access, As you know, we have a partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, and they have promised us staffing during the summer, students as well for that area. But the 23,000 is a necessity to have someone there if we cannot fill it with volunteers. And we do have daytime staff that are doing their normal work. And again, those staff, it is our intention to have them take hours as well in the information center, although they do work flex time. So there are many hours, 98 hours a week that we figure on filling that info center, and I'm hoping that we can fill 50% this year with volunteers. But if I can't, I would hate to not have anyone welcoming people. And for this first 6 months, I would, I really recommend that we need something to fall back on. But only if we need it.
Anything else, Councilor Kersey?
I'll just make a general comment, Mr. Chair. I fear that we're burdening this facility with excessive amounts of labor costs. We don't even know what to expect. We don't know what the uptake is. And for a 6-month trial period, to try and go with as many of our current staff and see what the needs really and truly are, and then staff accordingly. In my mind, and different people will take different views on this, it would be a better way than to hire a whole batch of people and then expecting to have 15 hours, 20 hours, whatever, and end up getting nothing. And all you need is one individual who didn't quite hear the message at the date of hire, going out there to our beloved press and saying that our community center is falling on its face because it can't even afford to pay me. So it had to let me go. So I guess I'm cautious. I like to walk or crawl before I run, and so this kind of goes against my grain to run out there and hire all these people. You know, as far as the event laborers, we're going to be hiring 10 summer students. A large number of our events outside of the PCC are in warm weather. We've utilized our summer students in the past as well as our permanent staff. I quite frankly think, in talking to many of them, they're great team builders, where people work together in a job that they don't normally do. They see the pleasure that it brings to the community, and it helps to build the team and the spirit of the team. And I'm fearful that we may lose some of that. So that's my concern about all of this, and so I'm not sure how I'll vote on this, but I just wanted to put it out there where I presume we're gonna deal with some of this other stuff from the PCC a little bit later, as opposed to just what we're talking about here.
Yes, we will.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? All right, Mr. Mayor.
I just gotta say, I kind of sympathize with staff, because last meeting, we all said, hey, let's make sure that we have enough people there, and it doesn't, you know, it's, well, some members of council did.
Thank you.
And so I think staff went away with that and said, you know, let's make sure we have enough people here. How are we gonna put the people in? And then now we have the message that's being just given, and maybe there's others that counteract the message we've just heard.
I've been
saying,
consistent in my
saying,
message.
and that's,
Okay.
and I'm not trying to cause, I'm just saying, council needs to work on deciding this in terms of, you know, the direction that we're gonna go. I think, you know, the last time Budget Committee said, we probably wanna look at the opportunity, and make sure that we're there to welcome people and have the right staff to do the job, and then to kind of trim that back as required with volunteers or with other ways in which it's operating. And so staff have come forward to us with that option. So I just want to underscore that I think staff are trying to do what we as a group sort of said last time. Maybe the counselor didn't say that, and maybe other counselors didn't say that. I guess what I'd look for is, how do we resolve this? How do we move forward? Is it an up and down vote? I don't know. Is there something we can do to, as a kind of a temporary measure or whatever, to try to get us through this? I don't know. So felt I needed to make that comment, Mr. Chair. And I meant no offense to any counselors. I'm just saying, there's different visions here of how we want to achieve this. And I think at the end of the day, the common vision is that we want this center to be the greatest for the community, obviously. We are within the pro forma, and I want to underscore something because, it's funny, people say it's going to cost all this money to run the community center, but they discount how much the existing arena costs. The existing arena is more than $110,000 to run it now. We lose $110,000 on the existing arena, and the pro forma we have before us is we're not going to lose that much. So we're like, it's a net benefit position on this. And in fact, if we went with everything that staff suggested back when the pro forma was first written, it would be cheaper than the existing arena. So again, the community, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to understand that, or maybe we need to get that message out. That the thing that we're dealing with here is really trying to figure out what the best approach is on how to deal, how to staff this facility. But it's all for a benefit. It's going to be cheaper than that thing that loses us money on Hay Street.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Durley, and then Councillor Ribbiak, and Councillor King. Councillor Durley first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've often said that if we look at the cost of everything, we lose the value of everything. And this, just to build on what was said earlier, I think it imperative that we're creating a community center that will be the hub. It will be the gathering place. It will be the cradle to grave meeting spot. And I think we need to make sure that we are providing the proper service for this. People that come there and can't be guided to where's the walking track or where are we going, I think that would be a real kick in the pants if in fact we offer something and we don't give the proper help in order to make it succeed. So I think it imperative that we go to every effort to make sure that the people will be welcomed and the people will be able to participate, and all the questions that they may have will be answered. Because I think there's going to be some curiosity in the beginning. There's some naysayers out there that say it's going to fail. If these people come in and see that it's not going to fail, then that may change their minds. Those people that are positive about this now are going to be looking forward to doing things, and when they get in there, they want to have a positive experience. So I think an imperative, I've said this imperative too many times probably, but it is definitely incumbent upon us to make sure that we provide the proper service for an excellent facility that's there. We have a variety of things that are going to be going on in there, so we need a variety of expertise in there in order to make it successful, and that's all I'll say for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Durley. Councillor Ribbiak, and then Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of things to say about this, but let me just start by saying that I have a great deal of sympathy for a position that we really need to keep a budget in reasonable shape, and looking wherever we have to look in order to come up with the numbers, I think is an important thing to do. Having said that, I have two comments to make. The first is that startups are a problem. I've been involved in a number in industry. I can tell you that it's not entirely a shot in the dark. What you start is with a pro forma like we have now, and you assign people to various roles, and then you start up, and then you find out what you need more of, what you need less of, that's just going to happen. I don't know that we can say at this point that any decision we make now about more or less of anything would be a saving. The only relative or the only milestone we have to relate to is the pro forma. We can save against the pro forma, or we can go over the pro forma. That's all we've got right now. So my feeling is that the pro forma is where we ought to start. We gave it some thought. We understood it to be effective. Let's start there. Then let's see as time goes by, watching carefully to make the adjustments that we need to make once it starts up. So that's what I would say. The other thing I would say is this, that I'm just reluctant to think of the great volunteers that we have as a resource by which to reduce labor for which we ought to pay in order to get the essential stuff done. We don't know what's essential and not essential. I can see volunteers participating, and they do participate, and they improve things, they add to things, they bring to the town value that goes above and beyond kind of a baseline of work that we need to have and we need to budget for, and frankly we need to pay for. So to think in terms of, well, let's use people who are willing to be volunteers to replace what might in fact be essential wages, that's just not something that I think is on in my thinking. So I would want to be cautious about that. I'd like to find out what it is that we need based on the pro forma, apply it, see it through, add to it with volunteers who would find ways of making it a much better experience than it otherwise would be, but that's the role that I would see for them. Those are my comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Yeah, Councilor Keith?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think last week my two major concerns with what had been put before us was customer service, number one, because we do need to put our best foot forward when we open the doors. And simultaneously, safety, the safety of the staff working in the building. I think what we're looking at this evening is not our staff going out there and trying to staff this facility with champagne. They're staffing it not at the bare bones level either. They're somewhere in between, which maybe is the beer level. But I absolutely appreciate the fact that we do have expert staff who have been involved in opening large venues in the past. And I think that what's before us proves that they've taken into consideration all of the information that they received last week, and they've done the best they can to ensure that we are going to be able to service this adequately. And I think when I think about a comment that the director of RCW made, just because you might allow X number of dollars for staffing, if you need to massage that and not use the full amount that's been budgeted, that's what you do. You have to schedule staff conducive to business, and I think that's where we have to allow them that latitude. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else for a second time? Anyone? Just a couple of quick clarification questions, if you don't mind. Help me, I usually don't get involved in stuff like this, but $2,500 reduction and proposed reduction, 107. So is it 177,000 or is it 179.5?
No, if you add, it's 177,000, that includes the 2,500 reduction.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
all I need to know.
Yeah.
Okay, second question is that when you talked about the casual labor and these two entities, anything dealing with the labor, this is for a half a year or full year? Is it annualized?
This is a half a year.
So this is a half year,
Yeah.
and that includes the information desk. Customer two would be
Yes,
for a half a
everything is
year.
half a year, yes.
So it's not annualized.
No.
Okay, so everybody understand that so that we move. Okay. Any further questions on this page? All right, let's move on. Next is additional.
Here is just other items on the list for consideration for reductions. I mean, this is just to give council an idea of where other areas for reductions are. One is contracted services for Christmas light decorations. That's 7,000. Eliminate hanging flower baskets is 2,000. I think we would still have the flower beds, but we would eliminate the hanging flower baskets. No portable toilets in the parks, that's 10,000. No tree planting, so the original budget was 40, and this is the other 20,000. We already included 20,000 in the other list. No carpet cleaning in the buildings, that's 4,000. We put down the cost of operating the pool was 32,000. The Niagara Airport has a 37.44% increase, but this is something that's shared amongst other municipalities. We just wanted to note that. The municipal grants are still another 19,500. And we just wanted to note with the library that their original request was 46,000, and we already reduced it by 20,000 in this operating budget. So we just wanted to note that. So that's an additional 94,500 of just items that we just listed.
Members of council? Go ahead.
Thank you. So let me, I don't have the detail that goes into the 37.44% increase for the Niagara Central Dorothy Rungeling Airport, but just for the information of colleagues, there's a considerable chunk of that's, I think, the capital cost.
Capital, yeah.
And that's a capital cost that will enhance the airport in terms of its attractiveness to the region as we get into the discussion about whether the region should take it over or not. So there's kind of a built-in investment in that. The other thing I would say about that capital increase is that it will likely be handled in the same manner as the capital infusion was this past year, that is by way of being a loan. So at some point in time when hopefully the region takes over, that money comes back. So it's not quite the same as the capital expense for which we don't receive the money back. And as our treasurer has pointed out, this is kind of our share, and our share is, I can't remember what the percentage is. It's 17, and I don't know what it comes out to absolute dollars. What are we talking about in terms of absolute dollars? Do you have it?
So for you, Mr. Chair, the current budget for 2018, the town portion would be $20,837 for operating, $31,140 for capital, which, as the councillor said, I presume would be a loan similar to the capital outlay in the prior year, but that would be council's decision again. And then it was reduced by the loan repayment from the prior year capital. So this current year, we're expecting $5,411 in loan payments back. And so the net of all those three is what we put in the budget as the cash outlay for the 2018.
So that's for information of colleagues if they have questions to ask. Then.
Okay, aside from that, any other comments on these additional reductions? Councillor Durley, then Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, these are not your recommendations. These are just areas which can reduce the
Right.
budget. Because I'm looking at like no portable toilets in parks. I think we can't really do that because when players and parents are sitting in a park for an hour and a half or 2 hours while a ball game is going on, certainly nature calls, and I think these are necessary and things like that. So, a couple of these things I think are not possible to do, but I'd just like that clarification. And if in fact we do look at choosing some of these, I certainly will be making some other points at that time. Thank you.
I'll take it. Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I will refrain if we're going to discuss this at a later point. Thank you.
Anyone else? We'll get back to this. We'll park this, if you want to call it, for the time being. And now we'll move on to the
The last slide that we have here, this is the updated Pelham Community Center pro forma, and this one here includes the proposed $61,000 of increases that we have, the info desk, the casual event labor, and a decrease in the material fees. And so right now, the pro forma for 12 months, we said we had a net deficit of $101,261. Now we have a net deficit of $11,617. So the original pro forma that we brought forward earlier on before these recommendations was about a $49,000 surplus, so this just has swung that way. So I just wanted to show you that with, even with those salary increases, we're still well below the pro forma deficit.
Comments, questions? Councilor Ribbiak?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So, but this is missing the revenue side, which I think always has to be.
What the revenue is in here.
Is it on there?
Yep, the top part. Top part, so
Okay,
total projected
so-
revenues is 506,500.
And the salaries are 300, and the other costs are distributed.
So we have the salaries here, and then we have less the existing salaries that were included in the operating budget, so these ones were already existing, and the net expenses were 518,161.
Got it.
So
Okay,
the new
now I
propo- yeah, the
understand.
new proposed salaries were 300,000 and 300,000, whereas the pro forma had 600.
That's not a bottom line, that's just an informational line.
That's
Okay,
just
good.
information,
I'm
yes.
I'm very happy with this, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Councilor Kersey, then Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. On the revenue side, are the arena revenues, and I suppose gymnasium revenues to some degree, are they based on contracts that we've entered into with the user groups? So are they presumably pretty tight numbers?
Yes, and I'll pass it over to the Director of Recreation.
For you, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, Chair. Yes, they are. They're based on the license agreements that we have in place already,
Okay.
as well as some additional revenues for programming that we are assured that will be run.
It's a conservative number.
Yes, it's a conservative number.
So as a follow-up on, since you stay on your feet, please. You've mentioned programming, I presume through your department. Are the salaries that would be expended to run those programs allocated to the PCC as well? So there's a fair representation, we haven't just bolstered the revenue side and not.
Madam?
Yes, through you, all of the salaries, if it's a contracted instructor that we want to pay, it's under constructed, or I'm sorry, contracted services, that's where you're finding that. If it's the part-time, the summer camp is in these numbers, so all of our camp counselors would be included here as well. A portion of RCW, so what we've done, no different than with the other salaries for the facilities manager and so forth. So for instance, the recreation programmer, her full salary would go towards here. Well, I think it's 90, it's, no, anyhow. And the cultural programmer, a portion of her salary is in here. The festivals and events programmer, her salary is not in here. A portion of the my admin as well as my salary is in.
Okay. Another third question. With respect to janitorial services for the PCC, have we done a formal RFP to look at contracted janitorial services as opposed to bringing it in-house and hiring more, another full-time person and several part-time people? Have we done a formal RFP and compared costs?
Madam Director?
Through you, Mr. Chair. We have not. In the amount of time that we've had to prepare this, we've looked at contracted services. And interestingly enough, since our last discussion about this, we did go back out, and I had quoted between $25 and $30 an hour for contracted services. Now that minimum wage has gone up, those have all gone up now to between $30 and $35 an hour. So if the preference is absolutely to contract this out, we will absolutely do that. So it hasn't at this moment, but yes, if that's your choice.
I don't think I can make a decision to absolutely contract it out or not. What I'm asking is whether we've looked at that as an option in a solid way. And that entails an RFP, what's in the RFP, are they supplying the equipment, are they supplying the supplies? That's a big building, it's gonna have porcelain tile. We don't have the equipment to do that, so that's a capital cost on, because there's special machinery to clean that stuff. Most large facilities that are being built today use contracted professionals to do their janitorial service for all of the above reasons. So I'm not saying not, I'm just saying I can't make that decision based on the information that I have before me today.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, point taken, we'll take that back.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Councilor Christie, anything further?
I guess this is the point to bring this up, where we're going to hire, we're creating a beautification department, and the net result of that is we're going to be hiring a supervisor for facilities, 70% of which will be charged to the PCC. We have a facilities manager who will be, I believe, housed in this building, or at least be spending significant amount of time in this building. I don't understand why we could not have them reporting, not have the supervisor for facilities, but have a direct reporting to the manager of facilities. At least at the inception, let's see how, again, for the 6-month period, why go out and hire a permanent part-time, full-time person as a supervisor until we see how the thing shakes out in terms of reporting, functionality, et cetera, et cetera.
Madam Director?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm sure while I could give this answer justice, I am going to turn it over to our Director of Public Works, who I'm sure could provide much more detail.
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. I believe the Director of Human Resources answered this question last time about how SMT went through the discussions of every role. This current supervisor of facilities and beautification is a working supervisor. He fills in many shifts. He takes on scheduling of all of the personnel. He also takes on some shifts to cover when people are sick or away. He also manages capital projects. So with the changes that are proposed and with the geographical change, since we've had to move staff to TICE, since they cannot go to the PCC, we just couldn't figure out a way to have this position eliminated without the burden of the tasks that this person does translated to another person who currently works in facilities. We threw around the ideas of a lead hand taking on some of those duties, but then we are going down that road of still creating a supervisory position when we have someone who, we have a role that could take on those duties safely now. So SMT as a group discussed this at length, heavily vetted it, and felt that this this structure as a whole is what would be most efficient for the town with the least effect or disruption on the current service that we provide across all of public works.
Thank you. Anything further? Then I'll go to Mr. Mayor.
Carry on.
Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Just to the slide that's before us. So we heard the question about the revenues, and it sounds like those are, I think as the director said, conservative, hard revenue numbers, which is good. I just, you sort of look down the schedule of expenses, and some of them are, and we don't have to get into them specifically, but some of them are 50%, and then some of them are like not even, or some of them are more or whatever. Insurance, I thought, was an interesting one. It seems considerably lower than 50%, so.
But that's our quote.
That's our quote, okay. So can we just hear a little bit more about the expense side of the ledger that's being presented to us, Mr. Chair?
Sure, by all means.
Okay, so
So are we clear on how the salaries and benefits are? I think we're pretty clear
Yeah,
on that.
I'm sorry, I'm
Right,
not
Mr.
talking
Mayor,
about that, it's the hydro, it's everything else kind of
That's what I
below
was-
that, just
I
in
wanted to
general,
clear- yeah.
how much
Sure.
rigor's into this
Okay, so let's go down.
fence, I'm just,
No, that's a good point. So hydro, half a year, looks like it's a half year expensed. Right?
yeah,
Gas costs, water costs, you're projecting at that's the full year cost? For 6 months?
Through you, Mr. Chair, may I sit? Would that
Pardon?
be okay? Just 'cause
Pardon?
that-
Oh, you don't have to stand, no,
Okay.
go ahead.
The utilities costs, we went back and forth with because we did get an estimate from Enbridge Gas, estimating both the gas and the hydro based on the plans that we submitted to them.
Right.
The original pro forma numbers came from Leisure Plan, who helped prepare this original pro forma based on their experience and other similar type facilities. So we had the Leisure Plan numbers originally in pro forma. We had the estimate that came in from Enbridge. The Enbridge estimate is considerably higher. As this is an unknown, we weren't quite sure. SMT batted this around, and the decision was made to stay with the original Leisure Plan pro forma numbers and simply prorate it for a half a year. The water number remains at a full year because we are cycling through several ice surfaces during commissioning. We have construction water included, and making ice, taking ice away, depending on the schedule in July and August, and then making ice again. So we won't really have any cost savings from a water perspective. That is really where the number one water usage costs come from.
Okay, phone?
With regards to the telephone, this is the number that I received from the IT manager, so he felt that
Okay.
$2,000 is enough. And the other one as well is the internet. The original budget was $1,600, and his projection was $5,340, so we actually put in the number that the IT manager is recommending. And with regards to the insurance, that a full year insurance for the community center was $25,000, so this is 6 months of the community center that we received from our insurance brokers.
Okay, just a small point, the insurance itself, is it not covered under our total policy for the corporation? Do we have to take out a separate policy?
Also, there's an increase in new
Risk.
facilities and size and everything else.
So it's an additional premium
Yes.
for the addition of the asset? Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Can I just finish that,
Go ahead.
if you don't mind?
Go ahead.
Just the Enbridge piece is interesting, because I think they were looking at it. I was there to kind of welcome them when they were doing this as a bit of a project, and they didn't seem to have the right mix of how it was going to be used.
Right.
They were assuming that there was full ice, both rinks, all year round, and then that kind of had to be clarified. So, it looks like we're using the right number as opposed to the Enbridge number that didn't have some of the uses that were outlined. Thank you.
All right, sorry, Councilor Durley, go ahead.
That was my question, totally. If in fact Enbridge was higher, is that considering the actuals, or is in fact, there's some jockeying that needs to go around? But if in fact Enbridge was made aware that these changes were made, is their estimate including the changes that were suggested, or are we looking at something that they made uninformed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of any resubmission by Enbridge. It was just the initial based on the plans, preliminary plans at the time. They haven't been consulted, as far as I'm aware, to give us an updated estimate based on the current design.
That clears it up.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, that's it.
They were using full ice, both rinks, all the time, so.
Okay, anything else? Councilor Lane, along the expense side, go ahead.
No, actually, it's, unfortunately, it's on the revenue side. It just had an epiphany, if you will. And I'm just wondering, is on revenues, is this all of the revenues, including advertising and everything, is that included in here? Or is there still potential for considerable revenue from inside the arena and,
Madam Director?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's in addition, the revenues for, there are unknowns. So this is a conservative revenue figure. We have many other opportunities to make additional revenues. So we have the advertising, we have the servery, how that's going to be operated will come back to council for approval. We have the, programming, new programming. This programming that is in this budget is is existing programming. We have a ton of new programming that we plan on implementing, although we want to go in with conservative numbers so we can meet our targets. And as we go along, I know that we'll have bumps and humps and as we go, but at the end of the day, we should be able to do better than what you're seeing here in revenues. And of course, I do want to say that it costs money to make money. So for instance, if we're initiating a new program, we will be paying a new instructor. That instructor is on a contract basis, whereas they come in and they do their 10-month or 10-week instruction, and they're paid a certain amount, and then they're gone. But the fees that they'll be paid, the course, the program fees will cover it. So every little bit will add it up.
Councilor May, anybody else? Okay, any further questions? We'll receive this at this point. All right, so let's go back to, so here's where we're at. We have a budget that's proposing a 5% property tax increase. There are a list of items that were presented to us that would indicate that we could reach 3.5%, and as the mayor has always said to us, before blended. There's further reductions that we've also been given to us. And I guess my question to the council is, generally, we've seen the staffing for the PCC plus the overall budget. Just a matter of clarity, this co-payment, why is this here?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yesterday I was asked to present an option to council that if council wanted to change
Okay.
our current program and to bring a number of scenarios
Okay.
forward, so that's really for information.
That's a camera discussion, I think.
Yeah, and that's something that we would do in camera, and I would consider this to be something over and above what we're doing here, right? But on a general comment is, do we want to move to that type of program? That's something we need a more flushed out discussion. All in agree?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry, Councilor King, go ahead.
Mr. Chair,
Apologize.
just a question sort of in that direction. Because the Director of Human Resources is anticipating, she said that the RFP was closing and she's anticipating a change anyway in the benefits or the cost of the benefits. I'm assuming that this information that we received today may change dramatically as a result of the results of the RFP. Would I be correct in assuming that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, you would. And again, and just to provide additional information, this isn't my recommendation, and to do this, again, I would rather see us change it on the back end and not impact our employees. But it was asked, so therefore I provided. So
Okay.
again, it's a nice thing
That's
for you to
fair.
have and to look at, but I think there's other ways for us to do it. And yes, the number that was presented in the spreadsheet, I believe is a realistic number that we can get that benefit amount down this year.
Thank you.
So that, when you indicated to us that there's a $42,000 reduction, that's real.
Yes,
So the
yeah.
potential for other potential reductions based on cost, I'm very familiar with some, that would, it may make this other discussion, forgive me, redundant. If in fact the discussion is that we can continue on with a benefit package, but without having to go to this option.
Yes,
Is that fair?
that is correct.
Okay, so, but you'll let us know and then we can incorporate that as part of it.
Yes.
All right, folks. I guess I'll open up the general discussion. So, first of all, we have to ask ourselves, we have at this committee level, we have a 5% increase. What's the pleasure of council is to work towards a 3.5% increase. Leave it at 5%. Councilor Riviere.
Just for clarification, what we're looking at is the operating budget, not the capital budget.
My understanding it's the operating budget.
Is it truly
And
the
the whole
operating
budget, I would presume. Madam Treasurer?
Well, it's both budgets. We do
It's
the
a whole
operating
budget.
first and the capital. So let's just do the operating first.
Okay, so this is, any discussion that we want to have on specific issues infrastructure, that's a capital discussion, and we'll have it yet.
Yeah, I want to separate that. You're right, Councillor Ribbiak. I think we need to ask ourselves the more higher level question of where do you want to take this proposed budget of 5%? And we've been given a couple of options. Just so, if we did the additional considerations, and there's obviously a lot of arguments before we did that, that would add up, it's what, $100,000, Madam Treasurer, for a change in levy, is that correct?
117,000.
117,000, okay.
1%.
So anyhow, let's get back to Councilor Ribbiak, you could start, please.
Thank you. Your question is, do we leave it at 5%, do we go to 3.5%? I think staff has worked hard at putting together what I suspect they believe is a realistic way of moving forward to the lower number. They wouldn't have presented numbers that they didn't think they could achieve realistically. Same process that I've had to from time to time. They probably feel that they've cut away some flesh, but they think they can live with it. And so I would be happy if we would receive their suggestion that we move to 3.5% by reducing their budget by $177,000 on the basis that they presented.
Thank you, Councilor Ribbiak. Any other comments from other members of council? Going once, going, I'm not going to cut you off, this is the time. Councilor Kersey?
So we're just talking about the global number.
Global number itself, that's correct. And right now, what staff is saying that they can live comfortably, I'm not going to put words, level of service within 3.5% is achievable. 5% was more of what you would like to see the operation continue. This also includes, as we discussed, the staffing requirements for the PCC, everything else that's been presented here, without further considerations for reductions. Is that correct?
So just as a quick
Councillor
question,
Kersey, go
what
ahead.
does $10,000 represent? I'm thinking specifically of the Gypsy Moth program that we more or less promised our residents that we would put in the budget this year. So
Is
what
there-
percentage? What, negligible 0.1%?
You mean, what does it represent?
The Gypsy Moth program is $10,000. It's within your 177, so it would bring it down to 167.
I see.
What does that represent in terms of the operating budget? $10,000 is less than 0.1%.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct.
So I'd favor a 3.5, but I would put the Gypsy Moth program back in.
Yeah.
I think we made a pledge to our residents that we would do that.
Okay. Other members of council? Councilor Barry.
I just got a comment on that particular item, if you want, being from out in the country like Councillor Kersey. I'm not sure that $10,000 in the big scheme of things is anything that's gonna really do an impact on the Gypsy Moth population. I would like to be corrected if I'm wrong, but, you know, I just don't think it's, if you're gonna try and address a program, I think you need to be aggressive and address a program. If you're just gonna throw $10,000 out for the sake of throwing $10,000 out, how's it gonna help? And in fact, is not the region do a spray and that, and would this go towards that? I mean, these are questions I'd wanna answer on that particular line, if you would.
Through you, Mr.
Madam
Chair.
Director, it'd be interesting to hear, yeah, I mean,
Sure. We brought a report forward in the summer. We had quite a few complaints from a local neighborhood about issues with down trees in the park that backs onto, or the private properties back onto this park. So all the trees were affected. Although there were differing opinions of whether this is a natural cycle, whether this is an epidemic, and so on. In the end, we were asked to get some pricing to say, could we address the town trees in this particular part of town to at least alleviate those local residents of some of the symptoms that they were experiencing. So with that, no, it's not a widespread spray program. It's very specific to this neighborhood. It's actually a spray from below with boom trucks. It's not an aerial spray. We did look into what other resources are out there, whether the Conservation Authority or the region could offer anything, public health, and we really did hit some roadblocks. It's a municipal responsibility that some municipalities have adopted and some have not. So it's considered a pest and it's a nuisance, and this would be a service to provide to the residents to help alleviate the issues that they suffer.
Thank you. Councillor Lane.
Yeah, I guess my question on that is that if you're going to do it in an isolated area and then someone else in another isolated area has a problem, and are you going to choose to do that isolated area at $10,000 or not? I'm just questioning where it would end once it started, if in fact, because gypsy moths aren't going to stay in one little confine. We found out with ash borer where they are, so I think gypsy moths are somewhat the same. They go to an area and then from there they go. So my question has been answered, but I'm not sure that's
So
best money spent. But
right, so that brings an interesting back to Councillor Kersey's point, is that leave the current budget for gypsy moth eradication as it is. Don't reduce it by 10,000. Is that what I'm hearing?
I brought that up for discussion, Mr.
Right.
Chair. You know,
It's less than, you're right, it's less than 1/10 of 1%, right? But as a matter of,
I don't know what the rest of it.
other members, how do they feel about that? Councillor Riviere.
Chair, we have other opportunities for flexibility within the presentation that we received from staff. For example, the decrease in municipal grants doesn't eliminate the municipal grants. If we wanted to trade one for the other, we could probably manage to do that and stay at the 3.5%.
Yeah.
So I would
So what's your
propose
pleasure?
that we think about that.
And so let me just try and help. We're good with 3.5, right? And the number with or within,
we haven't said that, though, have we?
pardon?
We haven't said that.
No, I'm putting out there for you to make a decision. We have to make a decision. I'm doing it on purpose. If not, then forgive me, but we go back to 5% or something else. That's the only reason I'm doing it. I'm being purposely doing this. I mean, we have to make a decision one way or the other. We'll start with Councillor King, then Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would support 3.5% based on the proposed budget reductions. If we can massage that gypsy moth into the budget somehow, then I think we should. But I certainly would not be supportive of the additional reductions.
Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Thanks very much. Yeah, I think Councillor King and I are almost saying the same thing, so I'm agreeing with Councillor Kersey that we say, let's take this proposed budget reductions and additions based on the conversation we had, and, you know, make it, instead of 177, make it 176, include the gypsy moth. We kind of made that promise. I would not, what did I say? 167, I apologize. 167. I don't know that I'd be comfortable, and I think Councillor Durley and Councillor King spoke to this, with the other reductions. You're getting very close to the bone here. So the municipal, the municipal grants actually leaves in, I would presume, the gift in kind, which is so important, especially when the vision of the new municipal grant program is to have festivals and events and be supportive of all of that. It does leave a few dollars in there for, in case something comes up for council to consider, but not the large amount that was there. And I think there was a, so I'm comfortable with that number. And I was trying to figure out, because the region didn't really tell us what the number was going to be in terms of the tax rate.
Right.
So it's difficult to, our staff give us the tax rate here, but, so I don't know if we have that, or we can have that when we look at this on November 5th to approve, but
Right.
I was running some numbers, and it looks like a 3.5 is roughly a 2.5 blended.
How much, Mr. Mayor? Sorry.
2.5 blended, roughly.
Right.
So to add, that's my estimate or whatever. So to have that, we'll have to figure that out.
Right.
So that has to be, so I know staff will work on that
Well-
and give us that number, but that's my rough and ready number, so.
Thank you. Anybody else? For Councilor Durley, any?
Nope.
No, good? You're good with that? Councilor Christie, then Councilor Lane.
I have a question. If there are other issues within the operating budget that we want to talk about, that's a separate issue from the 3.5.
No, you're going to talk about it right now, because if we're going to reach that, if there's ways of reducing it, then they need to be discussed now. That's just my interpretation. I mean, here's a proposed list. If there's anything else that needs to be considered, either reduction, addition, now's the time to do it.
Okay, I'd like to revisit the issue of the health and safety secondment. It appears that, and this is not about personalities or anything, it's about position.
That's
okay?
correct.
It appears that the administrative assistant of the CAO and mayor is really only a part-time job, because we're replacing it with a part-time person. And we're taking the full-time person
How much of this
and
is closed session?
I'm not mentioning names, it's up to you.
Yeah, but you're talking about positions.
Well, yeah, and you're right. It is an identifiable person. So if it's the pleasure of council, then we would have to go into closed session to discuss this, because we've already identified a person that's involved in the new position. I don't know how you want to,
Mr. Chair,
go ahead, Councilor.
there's only one person in the position, so that if you talk about the position, you're talking about the person. I think we need to do this in camera.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying too.
Okay, so you want to just park that right now and go on camera to discuss this?
Whatever.
All right, so that position, that will be dealing with the health and safety. Are there any other items within the operating budget? And for that matter, we'll go into capital too, but within the operating budget itself. Councilman, go right ahead.
Yes, thank you. I made some time earlier, I made some comments regarding an item, and I don't know what happened to it, and that's the town snow plowing of sidewalks. Is that still in the budget as such, and is there any flavor for changing that?
Madam Director?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The complication with that is that we are in a contract, a multi-year contract with the service provider, since this was negotiated in December of 2016. This contractor has taken on the purchasing of capital equipment in order to accommodate us with this contract. To cancel that service would mean we would have to cancel that contract. It wasn't something that we explored further, since it is a legal binding contract.
May I ask the term of the contract? the
No,
length?
no, I was just going to do the same thing. Go right ahead, Councilor.
The original contract was 3 years. We're in the third year of it. So it is to extend that contract, this existing one, since they also provide other snow services, for an additional 3 years.
Is that included in this proposed budget? So if the contract expires 2019, it also includes snow clearing, a whole bunch of other contracted
No,
things.
it's just,
Go ahead. Madam Treasurer, somebody help us here about this?
yeah, no, it's only included in the in-year. The in-year portion is included in the budget, the 2018 portion only.
Right, and then 2019, it's up for renewal.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's up for renewal. It would have been up for renewal at the end of this season in early 2018, because this is the third winter that we've had them with this
So this is the
contract.
third year.
This is the third year, but as part of the quoting, when we went back and forth in November, December 2016, they offered us this service. The quotation information was delivered to council to say, look, we'll provide this sidewalk service at these rates, but with that, we will require the extension of the existing contract because they've taken on leases of equipment in order to provide us that service. So that extends it from 2018 to 2021.
Okay, so
Okay, Councilor Lane?
Just as a follow-up to that then, do they do all of the town sidewalks?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. They do about 69, 70 kilometers of sidewalk plowing, yes.
And I only have one other comment through you, Mr. Chair, is that I think that there needs to be some, maybe more oversight or whatever, because I know I would be upset if I lived in town and some of the quality of the cleaning that I've seen, I think leaves something to be desired in some areas, and that's all I have to say.
So I guess the question of the quality of the service, the metrics involved, and I don't want to comment because I also have seen some stuff that I'll talk later that we need to talk to the contractor. I know there's remedial work that's done at the end of the winter season, but recently, we'll leave it at that.
If I may
Okay, so
comment?
as I understand it, their contract is extended to, and I remember that discussion, I think many of us remember it was extended to 2021, right? I remember that we had that discussion, so, and notwithstanding that, I think what Councilor Lane and others you'll hear of having sort of an evaluation of how well they're doing the work. I think that's pretty important. Okay, Councilor Lane, anything further?
Thank you.
Okay, so we have one item that deals with human resources. We'll deal in camera. Any other items under operating budget? I just want to add, just as a matter of when we talk about reducing the 177, if in fact you come back with additional savings through the benefits, they would apply directly, I would imagine.
Yes, they would.
Right?
But through Mr. Chair, it's already counted.
Yeah.
But if you're, but
If
you're
it's-
also
if it's more, though, if
RFPing.
it's
If
more.
it's more.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. If you're
yes.
going to come back with additional premium reductions, those would be
Yeah.
also a bonus.
Yeah, yeah,
It would help with the
Yeah.
impact.
to bring something back on the table.
Can I just comment on the,
Go right ahead,
on
Mr.
the
Mayor.
snow clearing?
By all means.
I think council entered into that snow clearing at the request of residents. The service I've seen has been exceptional. There are, if councilors have some knowledge of parts of the service that aren't exceptional, they should tell staff. You know, now's not the time, and we didn't get into it, but,
No, that's what I would
So-
suggest, yeah.
and I know that some councilors do that when they hear things, they send it to staff, so please do that, and then it can be addressed. That's it, thank you.
Okay. Councilor Durley.
To that, Mr. Chair, I've had people knock on my front door and complain about the level of service with the sidewalk clearing. So there is some question as to are all areas being handled the same way? And because actually there were a couple of very adamant irate people that were really complaining about the service. So it may be isolated, however, you know, we certainly should be having a discussion with the contractor to see if in fact they are having some challenges that is causing the level of service to be to the standard that we would like. Thank you.
So picking up and agreed, Mr. Mayor, we will send you pictorial evidence and that, and we'll leave it up to you to discuss with the contractor without passing judgment.
If I may, sure, through
Sure,
you,
by all means.
Mr. Chair, absolutely, as complaints come in, please forward them right away, because the contractor has quite a good reputation with us. We get
Right.
quite a few comments about the fast service, the salting, the prompt attention to restoration needs, should he be able to. Our challenge this year is that we're not getting a deep freeze continuously, so shoulders are soft, lawns are soft, and as they go by with the plow, they're tearing it to bits. So he's been, the representative from the contractor, has been really responsive. I'm surprised to hear about the negatives, so please forward them, as he will go out on site, visit with whoever is having a concern, and try to address it right away, and we do try to act on those as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Madam Director, and I think it has to be taken, and it's not meant to be derogatory or negative, it's just a matter of measuring the quality of the service. And I agree that the weather this year has been all over the map, hot, cold, And, I mean, basically, we did it at the request of residents. So let's leave it at that, and we'll follow up, and we'll leave it with you, and once we give you some evidence of what's been happening. Okay? Anything else under the operating budget? Hearing none, at this point, I'd like to move into what I think Councilor Ribix, are there any issues with respect to the capital budget? Councilor Ribix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last time we began a discussion, and I'd like to continue the discussion with regard to Pot Street,
Yes.
if I may.
Yep.
Last time we were given re-given a document that was from our Director of Public Works to the CAO regarding Poth culvert repair. I don't know whether people have that with them.
No, I don't. Yep. Madam Clerk has given to me, yes.
So what was provided to us was essentially the price breakdown of replacing like for like, and I guess we could have a discussion about whether that's a lot, or I think it's probably on the high side, but that's really not what I want to talk about. If that's what staff believes is the right thing to do in a like for like replacement, then I'm not going to substitute my very limited technical capability for their very great one. But what I would like to do is to ask a couple of questions. When we talk about doing something that is not at the level that is recommended, we talk about we can do that if we assume a risk or a liability. So what I would like to do is know, what I would like to ask is what are those risks and liabilities? What is the probability of those risks occurring? What's the extent that we might be faced with? If there's an answer to those questions, I think it would help me understand whether I should feel that we should go ahead with this project this year or put it off. The other question I would want to ask is, if we did this year, what is the impact on the long-term capital program? We see that we have $1 million plus put aside in 2019. Would it be necessary to spend it in 2019? Would it be necessary to spend it at all within the term of the current long-term capital plan? So I'd like to hear about both of those if we can.
Okay. Do you want me to, and Madam Engineer, go ahead, I've got a document here. Do you want me to read it, or do you want to, why don't I just start by answering that question first? On behalf, both the mayor and I met with the minister, and they made it very clear to us. Notwithstanding, and Madam Engineer, you can discuss the design. They made it clear to us that under the Ontario Standard for Bridges regulation, I won't read out, where any person undertakes or causes to be undertaken the design, evaluation, construction, rehabilitation of a bridge, the design, evaluation, and construction, rehabilitation shall conform to the standards set under the Canadian Highway Bridge Design Code and the most current accepted engineering standards, guidelines, procedures, and practices. And there's a regulation that is attached to it. In addition to that, the Ontario Municipal Act states, municipality has a jurisdiction over our highway bridge, shall keep it in a state of repair, and this is where that is reasonable in circumstances, including the character and location of the highway and bridge. And two, that a municipality that defaults in complying with subsection 1, as mentioned before, is subject to a negligence act, liable for all damages that any person sustains because of default. As a result of the installation and design of this approach. And I'll let Madam Engineer, they gave us, to add to that, our CAO added, I think some of you got this, or all of us should have got, is this repair or investment going to create wealth or result in furthering our infrastructure gap? And in this specific case, do the 9 parcels of all require road access to Weber? Could they use Chandler, et cetera? If these 9 parcels do not generate wealth needed to replace this infrastructure, where is the money going to be generated? On this note, the budget you submitted to us was $494,000, right? That's what I have here in front of me. And your suggestion was it was not recommended. Madam Engineer.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. That's the construction budget to replace like for like, which wouldn't satisfy the legislated requirements. So we would like to get this repair done. We'd like to get it done this year. What we're facing, though, is a code, no different than a building code. So it would be like asking to direct staff to build a building that doesn't meet the building code. Wouldn't be something that I think you would consider. This is the same. We have provincial legislation which points to federal legislation which details what the requirements are. There is no alternate agenda. It is simply us saying this is the design that meets the legislated requirements. The options to work around this aren't something that we have or would explore. We are looking at, continuing to look at any options that might reduce the construction costs without putting the town in any position of risk related to legislated requirements. Even this week, I contacted a drainage engineering firm that has done work for us before to see if there's anything we can do upstream with the size of that municipal drain and the cross-section to try to reduce that bridge span is really what we're after, is that's where the costs are. But in terms of recommendations, our recommendation, of course, is going to be to construct a design that meets the code. In terms of risk and liabilities, I can't assess that. The engineers that did do the presentation gave us some idea of what they estimate the settling could be. But to get into when that would occur and how catastrophic would it be and what could happen is a whole nother level of risk and probability that's not something that I'd be prepared to predict.
Councilor Ribbiak, and then anybody else? Oh, pardon me, sorry, Mr. Mayor first.
Well, that's okay, Councilor Ribbiak.
Go, Councilor Ribbiak.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd like to,
No, go ahead.
to just finish off this discussion. So for purposes of absolute clarity, any discussion that there might have been around a municipality being willing to accept a minimal risk in putting in a different design, that's just absolutely off the books. If we're going to go with anything at all, it's got to be this design that was presented at $1 million plus. I've heard everything from $1.2 million to $1.5 million. That's the only design that we can do to effectively reopen POTH. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I don't know about the discussions that were had about taking on the risk. My estimate would be that the risk would be borne personally. I don't think that a council can take on directing staff to install or construct or design something that's not in conformance with legislation and not take on a personal liability for that direction when you've been informed what those risks are. I'm not certain, but that would be my thought. We are continuing to explore whatever options might still exist, and this is our last Hail Mary, was to call to see if the municipal drain work could be done upstream without any risk of flooding. That might be able to save us some size, so that cross-section that's going under the road could somehow be reduced. And I had to call them to say, hydraulics-wise, is there something we can do? Even at the risk of having to open up the engineer's report, there is a cost there, but this is very minor compared to the costs we're talking about here. His preliminary look at it, he had some hope. He felt that there could be something. He commented that there are upstream, there's upstream work in Wainfleet, or upstream parameters in Wainfleet that are affected by hydro dams and hydro downstream in the falls, so that the flow through this particular municipal drain is affected by hydro and their need to channel water and make hydro. So there are long ripples, and he was examining how this water flow might have affected the age. He's on it. He's got some great ideas, but with that, I don't have any firm answers. So at this point, this is all we have on the table from the engineering firm and the soil tech. This is as far as I can recommend at this time. And if we'd like to perhaps consider red circling something to keep it in this year, I'm not sure what the other options are, but I can't recommend anything other than the current code that meets the legislation or the current design.
Thank you, Madam. Councilor Rybak?
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Chair, there were obviously three considerations, and one of them I think we've just taken care of. One is the cost, meaning what's the design, how we're going to put it in there, what's it going to operate like. So that's one. Second is timing. Is it next year? Is it this year? And I guess we should talk about that. And I guess looking at the CAO's addendum to the report, I mean the import of his question, if you dig right through it, is should we open it at all? And maybe that's where we ought to start. My own view is that yes, we ought to reopen it. And second, I think, and let me just address that. His question is with regard to whether the parcels of land on Poth will generate enough wealth to cover it. The fact is, we have the road. It exists as part of this town. It's only a question of whether we maintain it or don't maintain it, and it's not really a question of deciding whether we ought to have a road there or not. That decision was made in this town quite some time ago. So I don't think it's a question of whether we ought to do it at all. I think we ought to do it. So the question is, do we do it now? Do we do it later? And my preference is to do it earlier rather than later, cheaper rather than, not cheaper in the sense of poor quality, but less expensively than not more expensively than it needs to. And frankly, that million something is a bit of a catch. But I think that we have the road. People live on the road. They have a need for that access. People who live there have particular needs and concerns. So I think we ought to reopen it sooner rather than later. I would, and as inexpensively as possible. So those are my thoughts, and I don't know whether we need a motion with regard to that, or whether this is, or if a motion is required to make the change to the capital budget to move that project forward. And indeed, as Madam Director has indicated, maybe red circle it pending a better design. But I'd like to see it put into this year's budget if we can.
Thank you. We will put that on hold right now until other comments. Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. So first, hearkening back to the discussion we had with ministry officials, again, a high-level discussion.
Yeah.
But they mentioned something about there's a distinction between traffic counts and what one had to do and follow the code. So I guess using the analogy of a building code, which we understand, a building code for a house is different than a building code for student housing, is different for a building code for an apartment, or is different than a building code for a dance hall. So I don't know if we ever had that answered. I thought we talked about it here, so maybe the director can look into that and see. So we kind of made the case, you have to build it for, as if all these big vehicles are going on, whatever, and hundreds and thousands of them are going on it. So that was my understanding. I think interesting what the director said in terms of hydro and the Welland River. We know now that Ontario Hydro does use the Welland River as a reservoir, and that every drop of water from the Welland River goes into the hydro canal. Therefore, every drop of water that goes through this area, and this links up, this is the Big Creek, but then it eventually goes into Quail Creek, goes into the hydro canal. doesn't go into the Niagara River. And so it's interesting to look at that element. I know, for instance, E.C. Brown Conservation Authority, the park that's there, the natural park, formed because essentially the farmer couldn't farm it because of the daily fluctuations. And they tried to put in something for seasonal fluctuations. Anyways, that's another issue. And so I look forward to hearing that information. I'm not prepared necessarily to make the discussion or the decision tonight. And I think we can do a little bit more work. But I think one of the things that's kind of kicking around in my head is the value for money, right? So what's the value for spending $1 million on this? So what was the traffic count? 50 vehicles a day? 30 to 50?
30, 50, around there.
I'd rather spend $1 million on Pelham Street, where there's 10,000 vehicles a day. It would take 200 days of traffic on this particular road to match one day in front of the traffic in front of Glennie Green School. So I think we need to at least think about that. There is a responsibility here because it's a road. I think that's what the councilor's saying. It's been a road. It's been the road for 40 years. It's been here. But I also think, somebody says, here's $1 million, where are you going to spend it? Are we going to build this bridge, or are we going to spend it somewhere else and invest it in the community, which is, I think, what the concept is. So are there other ways that we might decrease the cost? I appreciate the director looking at that and changing the design upstream, right? So again, instead of just doing it exactly what's there, broadening the view. So I think we should get that broader view and before we make the decision tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other comments? Councilor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Firstly, I agree with the mayor. Secondly, I had just a general question. What if we were to declare these works as municipal drain works as opposed to road works? Would that remove us from the obligation to build according to the bridge requirements and all of that if we treat it as a municipal drain works? And just, so we're replacing the municipal culvert, put the road back the way it is. Does that circumvent the act?
Madam Engineer?
That's the wrong word, but
Yeah, no, I know.
you get the feeling.
Madam Director?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the municipal drain issue relates to who pays, or I should say the Drainage Act addresses who pays for that crossing, and because it's a municipal road allowance, the way that it's structured is that municipality takes on 100% of that cost. Whether it's crossing a municipal drain or a valley of open fields or water, it doesn't matter. It's the span and the structure that needs to be built to cover that span. What's underneath it makes a difference in terms of the design, but from a foundations point of view, but not from a applicability of the code. Because it's a road. So the design assumed a basic road, 2 lanes. We did discuss this with the design engineer that night about consideration of load restrictions or going narrower. We talked about enforcement of that, and again, we take on the liability. And he didn't feel there would be much savings in going to a load restricted type design. You'll remember he talked about how that design was structured and whether it's a school bus that can span the whole thing or a passenger vehicle, so he didn't feel there would be any savings in going. So this was the lowest basic road design assumption without getting into load restricted or exceptional type single lane structures. We did ask about the single lane, whether we could reduce it. He said it's already actually more narrow in design. We would be replacing something that's narrower than a standard lane width, and we would be replacing that like for like, as that would still be allowed under the code.
Okay, Councillor Kersey?
Well, given that information, I'd be very hard pressed to vote in favor of spending between $1.2 million and $1.5 million on a road that's supporting traffic of 30 and 50 cars a day when we have other projects that are servicing. I realize it's a hard decision if you live on that road to accept, but, you know, we have to spend our money wisely, and I think we have to look at the projects that we support, so I would be hard pressed. I'll be interested to see the follow-up that Madam Director is looking into and see if there is some significant savings. But at this point, to pull it forward and lodge it into 2018 capital, I think would be not a good move at this point.
Thank you. Anything further? Councillor Kane?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I agree with what Councillor Kersey is saying in terms of being hard-pressed to spend that $1 million in that particular area. What I would like to see is that amount red circled and wait for further information to come back so that we can make a better decision.
Thank you, Councillor Kane. Further comment? Councillor Rabia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the views of colleagues, and I recognize that they differ from mine, and it's absolutely legitimate. I would like to make just one comment with regard to the discretionary aspect that we seem to believe this expenditure has. We talk about if we had $1 million, would we spend it here or there? I'm not sure that this is an expenditure that's quite as discretionary as all that. In as much as we have the road, we have committed to people, it's been used for a long time, there's an expectation that it's going to be there. This isn't like we don't have it now, either here or there, so where are we going to spend it that would make the biggest impact? This is a road that exists now and to which we have made a commitment, and people to whom we've made a commitment before. So I don't really feel that the argument that this is kind of a discretionary issue is perhaps as entirely valid. I appreciate that we may not have the money, we may not be able to do it, and I would argue that maybe move some stuff aside and maybe future considerations may be used to pay for it. But I don't see that as being as discretionary perhaps as people have indicated that in their minds it might be. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further comment? Mr. Mayor?
Thanks very much. I understand and appreciate what the councillor's saying. I was using it as an example, so, you know, his comment about discretionary, I appreciate that. I pulled up the map here, and I note that this drain does also cross Weber Road, and I wondered if staff have reached out to the region, because somebody told me anecdotally that that had been replaced a couple of years ago, not that long ago. So I don't know what on Weber as it continues south.
Right.
So I don't know if that would be helpful to have that information or not.
Madam Director?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we have reached out several times. So, and I'm not sure which one it is to the east. I thought it was the one immediately to the east that is due for replacement. The design is not yet underway. We've asked them to give us a copy of their geotech. We've shared our geotech so they know this is happening. We asked them, we were considering to see if we could piggyback on that work to get some economies of scale to do the project together, but they have design in 2018 and construction in 2020, I believe. So because of the delay, we weren't able to exploit that. If I could also comment, just to make some corrections, the traffic counts that we originally reported was, I think, 54, based on data we had from 15 to 20 years ago. We did counts to the north. We got about 200. So it's still not high volume road. But I wanted just to make note that we have 23 structures similar to this in the town of Pelham. We have 5 more that are in very similar condition that are slated for replacement over the next 5 years. We've been moving that planned work forward. So we will be back here again soon with the next structure. So we have a 100-year plan to forecast maintenance costs for these structures. We have a 20-year capital forecast. This isn't something that will sneak up on us. It's simply that we will have to keep treating this issue over and over because it's a current situation we have with the roads and the construction that happened in the 70s, and the design of choice was these steel culverts. Not all of these 23 structures are steel. We do have quite a lot of concrete now that is intended to last a lot longer, but this won't be the only one that we'll be talking about.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, all right, and then Councillor Lane.
For those that live on the road, I don't know if this is soulless, but it has been closed for a while. I wondered if they can, those property owners, I know Councillor Durley would be able to speak to this, if those property owners can go to MPAC and say, hey, the conditions in front of my house changed, therefore the value of my house changes. I don't know if that's a consideration for folks or not.
I don't know. It's hard.
Thanks.
Then maybe what you're saying, that they should pursue that with MPAC.
Oh, probably.
Yeah, to find out what the impact of that is. Councillor Lee?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Was, for the Madam Director, was there anything that was ever considered or the ability to put an insert of any type through this culvert? Was that something that would even be worth a thought, or is it, I'm just talking out loud, which is it?
Madam Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. It was our first question. It's not a contender for rehabilitation, they call it. Many are, because you're able to work with good bones, if you will, or if you get ahead of it soon enough. So the presenter that came last week about the drainage study, also are experts in rehabilitation of culverts, and part of that recommendation about drainage was to get ahead with a more aggressive small diameter culvert program. Those are the ones that tend to be better contenders, even with structural issues, to be able to go in and inject or slide in a sleeve that's able to manage the flows. Because of the size, 4.2 meter culverts here, this is a very large span. We're not able to exploit any of those options.
Okay. Full-fledged discussion. What I'm hearing is, one, that we move it forward, or secondly, as another option. As part of that is that we wait forward till more information comes out, a much more cost-efficient way in which to approach the project. I'm also getting the understanding that we'd like to maybe, and I'm not putting words, is red circle this and leave this for next year, because it is true, Madam Director, that they did the other night present. There are several others that'll be coming to us. Notwithstanding that, both the mayor and I, he's right, we both heard general interpretations, and that's what kind of not surprised us, that if you go ahead and do something and council instructs to build something that is not within, then it becomes our risk. We're fully responsible for it. So that's something that I'm not going to, I think something that we should also maybe understand what we mean by that, because it was a little too generalized. I don't know about you, Mr. Mayor. It was a little, like, left scratching my head thinking, all right, we can go ahead and do it, because it's not such a big risk. But if in fact it puts us, as you've heard me say many times, it doesn't immunize us, then we could have a potential problem. At the same token, I think all of us have said, you know, the investment of $1.2 million, it's a lot of money. And if it is, and it is, on the same token, Councilor Rebecca, you're right, it's an asset. It's part of our roadway system, and it has been there, and we need to do everything possible to ensure that it's corrected. So what's the pleasure of council? What would you like to do? Councilor Ribbiak?
I think the middle ground might be to bring it forward and red circle it pending further information. And if the information we get through the course of this year suggests that there's a way of dealing with it that
Okay.
that we deal with
I
it
hear that
then.
as a direction, right, as a suggestion.
That's what I'm hearing.
Rest of the members of council? Are we good with that?
Is that a motion?
Is that a motion? Do you want to put that in a motion?
I would make that motion.
All right, do we need a seconder? I guess we do. No,
Voting-
no, we don't need a
You
seconder.
seconder, but you do need to-
All right, so the motion is that the Path Street project be red circled and that we await further information with respect to, and move forward.
Move it, so I just need to understand, Mr. Chair,
Go.
that we're moving it to the 2018
And
and
put
that
red
it's
circling
red
it.
circled pending further information.
Yes.
Does everybody understand that? Any further comment? All in favor? Opposed?
Thank you.
Okay. So it stays where it is, and we'll have to wait and see what come back. Madam Director?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I might clarify, it's currently in the 2019.
Yeah, it is in the current, it stays where it is in 2019.
Understood.
As you presented the capital budget, it said 2019, so basically, unless there's a consensus to move it back to 2018, and apparently there isn't. That doesn't stop, I don't think, you bringing us, what you were suggesting to us, further information on a better way of doing this, that complies with code. Is that what I'm hearing?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have budget for him to do a detailed investigation or design, but he's giving me a very preliminary one.
So why
based
don't you
on
bring
the
it to us?
information.
Yeah, why don't you bring
Absolutely.
it to us, so at least we have some idea of what it would cost to do with that. All right, thank you, nice full-fledged discussion. Any other items in the capital budget?
Capital.
We already went through operating, so,
Okay.
Councilor Kersey. Oh, do you have another one? Okay, well, you got something with the operating?
You want to go?
No, no, on capital, I have some.
Oh, no, this is capital, that's, go ahead, we'll start with Councilor Kersey, then Councilor Lane.
Okay, thank you. I have a number of issues. Number one, I see that the the study for the backwater valve program is back in the capital budget. And quite frankly, I think it's $50,000 that we don't need to spend. The OBC covers a lot of new builds. Most residential situations don't require it. Most of our industrial buildings, which are the greenhouses, et cetera, are not on municipal water. And where we build multi-story buildings, I believe the OBC covers that a backwater valve needs to be put in so you don't, in the event that the system loses pressure, we don't contaminate the backflow of the water from the high-rise. In addition to that, online, and I brought this up last year, there are numerous freebies out there that have been developed. There's an organization that is surrounds this whole concept of backwater valves, so I think we need to explore that and see if we can adapt one of their programs. The other reason I'm opposed to this is that it will impose upon us the fact that we need to do inspections on these backwater valves to make sure that they're operational, which means more staff. And those costs, of course, would be passed on to the property owner, which I think they wouldn't be very happy with as well. So I would not support the backwater valve program. I'd sooner see the $50,000 used for some other capital undertaking.
Okay, so ju-
Do you want me to bring it to a head? I'll move.
I just want to make it so we're specific. So, project number WTR 0118, which is the backwater program, is what you're referring to?
Yes.
The $50,000 proposed for 2018. Go ahead, Councilor Kersey.
Well, I mean, I'm willing to bring it to a head if we want to not have a prolonged discussion, and that is that that the $50,000 allocation for the backwater valve program be removed, and that those funds be directed either to stay in the reserve or be used for other higher priority capital undertakings.
Other members of council?
Yeah, it's a 50.
It's on, yeah.
Where's it?
It's on tab, go to tab 20. You'll see it's the very first item under water.
This one.
Yep,
Oh, water.
Yep, I got it.
it's under water, sorry. It's under water, it's Schedule 20.
BTR 0118.
That's the one, Councilor Kersey, have I got it right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Can I, there's there's an acronym here, so it says it's a recommendation from the MOECC, Ministry of the Environment and Culture Change, right? So can we hear from the director what's
Yes, by
being
all means.
proposed here? We
Madam
heard from the
Director,
council,
well-
let's hear from the director.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is a recommendation that has come up on the last 3 ministry drinking water inspections. The last one occurred last week. He's just delivered the draft report to me today. He has a 2-paragraph opportunity for improvement, noted that there is no backflow prevention program policy or bylaw in place. The Ontario Building Code requires backflow prevention. The town relies on the change in building code to ensure backflow preventers are installed in new buildings. But there are considered medium risk facilities that a list has been, severe and medium risk facilities. A list has been put together. The bulk filling station, the elevations of Fenwick, the risk of Fenwick because it's a single feed, the elevations of the town of Pelham. We are considered a high-risk municipality for backflow, mostly because of our elevations, not because of our trigger potential sites. He is saying the town is encouraged to provide education and outreach to the owners. The town is encouraged to create a backflow prevention program and so on. So I pulled this excerpt into your annual water report in the past. He repeatedly keeps putting it on and really wants to make sure council is aware of the risk and aware of the under standard of care. You remember that training, aware of the risk that's taken on by not considering a backflow program. We're not recommending a Cadillac. We're recommending a full-on outside firm to poll what's out there, because there is a lot. We are one of the last municipalities in the Greater Toronto area not to have any backflow program. To have someone go out there, find out what works, bylaw enforcement, what programs, how do you do your public information sessions, how do you get the information out there. It's an extensive program, and I've lived through it both on the municipal side and on a consulting side. It's a big undertaking with big effects on the consumers, as Councillor Kersey noted. This is not something that can be taken on by our current staff. So it's simply a response to a repeated recommendation from the ministry inspector. We've been labeled as having severe and medium risk issues in town, and we just simply translate that into the budget ask based on what we know we're capable of in-house.
Thank you, Madam Director. Members of council? Response, comments? Councilor Ribbiak?
Seems to me that we've been putting it off and putting it off, but it sounds like it's something that we inevitably have to get to. So I guess the question isn't, are we going to do it? The question will be, when do we do it this year? That sounds like what the question is.
We're looking through you, Madam Director, that we're anticipating it would be done this year.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the program can be set up this year. The rollout of it can be as long as you'd like it to be. Typically, it would involve the high-risk premises being identified first and targeted first. So the backflow prevention, this is for prevention of contaminants from a private site that have the ability to pump or through elevations to get contaminants into our drinking water system. So you're asking that they install backflow prevention valves at their cost. Some municipalities have also explored co-sharing those costs, and that could be something that we could review, talk about, and see what council's palette for how we want to go forward. So we wouldn't be talking about rolling out the program in 2018. It would be simply designing it, saying we're ready to go, and 2019 and forward, it would be administered throughout the town.
Okay. Any other comments? Before you, Councillor Chris, I just want to see if there's anybody else.
Yeah, sure.
Councillor Day?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It just sounds to me like this is kind of like insurance, right? This is really what this is all about. Doing this program and installing these is sort of an insurance policy. Hope you never need it, but if you don't do it, and the ramifications could be quite serious. So I think it's something we're supporting.
Anyone else? Then I'll come back to Councillor Kersey. Councillor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to our director, I'd be curious to know how many municipalities in the region of Niagara have backflow programs?
Madam Director.
Through you, Chair, Mr. Chair, I believe all of them. Sorry, correction, there's one other than us in the 12 locals, if you will, that don't have a backflow prevention program and bylaw.
Thank you. Councillor Kersey.
So as follow-up, Mr. Chair, could we not reach out to them and get their programs, have a look at their programs, see if they're adaptable to our municipality, and thereby circumvent spending $50,000 on developing our own? If there are programs out there, could we not have a look at that?
Madam Director.
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely, we could. We just don't have the ability internally to take on that program. We have 2 engineering techs and 1 manager of engineering, and we are currently contracting out a lot of our engineering services as we can't keep up with the development applications, so it's just not a commitment I think we would be able to give our proper time into. Absolutely, this would be what the contract or consultant would do, would take whatever available resources that we feel could work and put them together and then present a program to council.
Thank you, Madam Director. Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much. This isn't, well, let me ask it this way. Is this program just sort of something like, okay, here's the program if you need it? Or are we actually going to look at our pipes? We're going to look at our pipes and configuration, aren't we? Isn't that what this money's going to be for? Madam Director?
No, it's generally the creation of a bylaw. It's the bylaw itself, bylaws vary, and they're loosely based on the CSA program. You can decide how aggressive or non-aggressive your bylaw is in terms of what you would impose. It's a screening and an inventory of the high-risk sites and medium and low-risk sites. And then it's the creation of a program it's really the manual. It's the how would people come in for permits. It's how would this be communicated. It's public information centers. It's meeting with the most affected high-risk site people and having them understand it. It's also us spending money on making sure backflow devices that are needed for municipal properties are in place. It's not just the installation of the backflow, like Councillor Kersey noted. There are regular, typically annual inspections that are required. So that program or that part of enforcement, how would we handle those inspections as they come in annually? It's all a program that you put together up front and then you kick it into gear and administer it. We would want to administer it using our current resources, so no, we wouldn't be taking on more staff or more water operators, let's say, to administer the program. It would fold in.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I don't know about, I thought it was, you'd look at our system. I guess I'm confused about the program because what I heard is 2 things. One, when I said look at the pipes, I thought you'd look at the system and say, okay, this particular range of properties conceivably could be, because of elevation, contenders for backflow on water. Is that what's going to happen? Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. It's part of the starting point to find out what are we working with and how many properties are at what level of risk, and then you build your program around those sites so that you can fold them in without them having a huge cost burden or capital outlay in 1 year.
Okay, and this is on the water side, so those that aren't on water wouldn't be paying for it, it's only those that are on water, is that correct?
Madam Director? Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, and it would only be sites that are considered a risk, so standard residents would not.
Okay, any other comments? All right, so what we have proposed by Councillor Kersey, that this be removed, and that it be, I guess, yeah, the money be used for something else.
Correct.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth.
Fine.
So the question is, what's the pleasure of council? Those who would like to see it? You have a motion, go ahead. Read the
Moved by Councillor Kersey that $50,000 allocation for backwater, for the backwater program be removed, and those funds be directed to the reserve or used for other higher priority capital undertakings.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any further discussion to that motion? All in favor of removing the fund, in favor of the motion?
I'm in favor.
Opposed? Defeated, so it remains. Councillor Kersey, next.
Thank you. I would like somehow to deal with the fixed asset management budget of $120,000. We've heard from our treasurer at her last presentation.
Which tab is that? I'm sorry. Does Madam Treasurer know? But anyhow,
Yeah. It
It
is
would be
under
under,
the IT, so it's tab 12,
yeah, tab 12, yeah, that's right.
PO 118.
yeah, 118.
Right, fixed assets and work, yes, there's
So it's
$120,000.
$120,000 budgeted there.
Councillor Kersey.
We heard from our treasurer last time she spoke to us that she was exploring again a program that is promoted by Ontario Good Roads Association, is supported by Ryerson University, and I think also the Municipal Financial Officers Association, in which there is pooling of the resources. They have the programs, they come in, they help institute the program. So either we red circle it and direct our treasurer to further explore that, and if it is can successfully be used within our municipality, that $120,000 either be left in reserves, or that the $120,000 be used again to support higher priority projects. So it creates some flexibility within the capital budget, such that if we can reallocate those $120,000 because this program pans out, it allows the director to do that. So I'd like to make that as a motion.
Thank you, Councillor Kersey. And to that point, Madam Treasurer, do you want to respond, please?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. We are exploring that. I haven't had a chance to work with the Director of Public Works and bring that to her, but it is geared for municipalities that are 30,000 residents and under. There are currently 17 municipalities that are participating in this, and the exciting news of having the MFOA, that's the Municipal Finance Officer Association, as part of that, and they're looking at the financial aspect of the reporting part that's required from the legislation. So, there's really strong players here that we have, so I would support that as far as the red circling, and it gives us a chance to look at what we have. There's also a $50,000 grant that we are pursuing, and we're still gonna pursue that because there's different things that we need to, yes, and they also have the work orders. They do have work orders too. So that's the big thing that I know that the Director of Public Works is looking at, is the work orders, and they do have a work order system, but that's where I need to discuss that with the Director of Public Works. But we are exploring that.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Other comments from other councillors? So the suggestion is that, and the Treasurer supports that we red circle this for 2018, pending receipt of further information. All right.
If I can just get a vote, then I can.
No, I was just going to do that. So all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next.
The next item that I wanted to talk about a little bit is, and we did speak a bit about it, I don't think we came to any conclusion, is the windows in the railway, model railway building, which is currently budgeted for $35,000.
So Schedule 14,
Yes, it's in 14. and
Project
it is-
FAC 0218. That's right, go ahead, Councilor Christie.
So again, I think we should explore options such as, repointing the windows and painting and cleaning up the storms, putting them back on. And look at our 5-year projection on that building as well with the same light. Bearing in mind that we need to look at the utilization of that building, the leasing of that building, because, if we harken back to the 1974 lease, that hasn't been renewed and has not been, updated. The group that's there has spent about $1,700 a year in terms of maintenance, which is their rent. So I think we need to explore that as part and parcel of this. I know I'm drifting away from the capital, Mr. Chair, but I think it's all part and parcel of the same theme, is, let's try and not go overboard on the money that we spend there. Let's iron out the operational issues on that building as well at the same time. So I'd like to see something done with that we explore, that 35 be again red circled. I always get nervous about the red circle because we always end up seeming to spend the money. But red circle to 35, have staff explore, the repair as opposed to replace option. And bring us a subsequent report on that. We got
Councilor Revere.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to, seconds aren't necessary
No, they're not.
in count, but I want to indicate that I support that very much. We had this discussion, I think, the last time we were here. I think that there's a report coming, I think we were told. I think that what we need to have in front of us is a business plan for the use of that property that makes some sort of sense, so that we know what the expenditures against revenues and potential are, so that we can move forward. So I just think that's a great way to proceed.
Other comments? Mr. Mayor.
I asked this last time, I asked about, there's a grant here?
Well,
Madam Treasurer?
yeah, the grant we just put there, we earmarked it as, a heritage grant, but we haven't pursued it yet. We just put that to say that we would look at getting a grant for it. If you get the grant, then,
So-
we wouldn't pursue it.
So currently, if this was approved, it would be only with grant financing.
Yes.
Okay. And the counselor's motion would stop the staff from trying to get grant financing.
I don't think so, but anyhow. Madam Treasurer, I mean, technically, were you going to apply for a grant anyways?
Well, okay, that was put down as something to follow up, to pursue,
Yeah,
so I
so
don't know
it's a-
if it's,
Exploratory.
did we explore what the grant could be, if it's a possibility? But if it's, the effort of doing that as well.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I apologize. I'm not aware of any heritage grants, but we had written it down. Today, we discussed it to say maybe there's something out there. We weren't sure whether there could be something applicable to capital, applicable to caulking the windows. It's really at council's direction of whether you'd like to do the capital investment. I think we talked about last time doing caulking instead, which is absolutely possible.
Okay, so can we direct staff to look into that, one, a grant possibility, and two, lessening the amount?
Sure. Why don't we do that as part of the,
Yeah, as a red circling, because sometimes when things are red circled, it's like,
Gotta be-
well, we're not gonna do anything on it.
no,
And-
these specific
And I don't wanna give that
instructions.
indication. Some projects, we do say, don't do anything on it. So let's be clear that we're kind of putting it on hold, but pending additional information. I'll be in favor of that, because I think
Okay.
there are heritage grants there, there's There's possibilities.
Councillor King?
Just, I guess, for clarification, I mean, I'm almost hearing from Councillor Kersey that there's two issues here. There's the question of whether the windows have to be replaced because it's a heritage building, or they could be repaired. But regardless of whether we got a grant or we didn't get a grant, or you can even apply for a grant for this, it still comes back to the other part of the question of what is the plan for this building going forward?
When then we do that as part of a staff direction and report to, let us, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
I believe, when we talked about this last time, staff indicated that there's a report coming,
Right.
so.
And there's a
So
report
that
coming.
takes care of that. Councillor Raybeck, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that, that we put this aside.
Right.
If there is operational type work required in order to maintain it, that's not a capital issue.
No.
And it can be done. I think it should be undertaken by the group that's there because that's part of their contract. I think we can probably afford to wait a year and just, you know, talk or paint or do whatever's necessary now and deal with this in the light of the bigger report when we get it. And let's encourage staff to get that to us quickly.
Okay, Madam Clerk, maybe we can feedback what we were looking, Councillor Kersey, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Well, I hope I've captured it, that the project FACO 218 in the amount of $35,000 be red circled, and that staff be directed to explore options to repair as opposed to replace, and report back with regard to grant opportunities.
I think that captures Councillor Kersey.
Yeah, it captures it with respect to 2018, but I think what we're saying is we want to go further. We want a detailed report looking at the next 4 or 5 years and what the output of that building would be. So I don't know that that's a separate issue and
My understanding is that report's actually coming as
Okay,
to
so
what the
let-
future use of the
okay,
building
so
is.
let's leave it at this then.
Okay, so, are we all clear on the recommendation?
I'm clear with it. It's not exactly what I said, but I can certainly support not doing
Any further
anything until we
comment?
get the report.
All in favor? Carried.
Okay. I've got one more thing. I had a number of other ones because I was trying to build up enough money that we could repair Poth using a drainage solution similar to what we were presented at $469,000. But since we're not going there, the one other issue I wanted to bring up is something that was in 2019, and that was with respect to Ridgeville drainage. There are a number of people in Ridgeville who, almost every time it rains or when we get a spring melt, experience flooding of their basement. And it's because of you obviously have a great big hill that feeds down onto the road. The road was elevated, the sidewalk was put in place, it was tipped towards the buildings. And so consequently, as the water comes down the hill in both directions, in certain spots, it floods into the basements of these people. I got a call again last night about an individual who on their last rainstorm got their basement flooded again. Staff has been out there a number of times, are aware of the problem. And I would like to see, I mean, there's budgeted of $60,000 for repair of the Ridgeville drainage. I assume that's what they're talking about. I wondered if we could bring that forward into 2018 and try and address these problems as, you know, our residents are experiencing damage on a fairly regular basis there. Whether it can be repaired sort of in a finite way, or whether there are some steps that could be taken on an interim basis in 2018.
Councillor Kersey, could you identify?
Let me see,
Tab
it'd
16.
be under roads, I think.
It's under roads,
I'll
17?
try and find it, Mr. Chair, I do
Of
apologize.
16? In the 2019
And it was in
schedule,
the 2019 budget.
tab 16.
Yes,
19.
2019 on page
Page
105, section 60.
So the Ridgeville drainage improvements of $60,000 scheduled for 2019.
Right, now I don't know whether that 60 speaks to that particular issue. Perhaps we could hear from our director about that and the comments about the flooding that we're experiencing there.
Madam Director?
Hey, Mr. Chair, in the front of the budget binder, there was a list that was prepared of projects that were in the 2018 Public Works Ask. This was one that our first kick at the can, we'd hoped that we could get it included. It is really for just extension of curb. So with the Ridgeville improvements that were done, we would piggyback on that and extend curbing to try to prevent any road drainage from entering private properties. So it was a preliminary estimate to say what would be involved in adding that concrete curbing to try to reduce that risk.
Okay. What's Councilor Kersey suggesting? Councilor Lane?
Just, if I might through you, Mr. Chair, on that, if we're gonna do curbs, but if the people still have driveway access and thing, would that not just kind of override the fact that we've done curbs, but if they still have driveways or whatever into their properties, would the problem be solved, or would it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's true, it's a Band-Aid, but can be somewhat solved with getting creative in the driveway apron to make sure there's also, it would affect them having to drive over some sort of barrier, minor barrier, but enough to deflect that sheet drainage, that water from coming from the road onto private property.
Councilor Lane?
Well, I'm just a thought, Mr. Chair, is that when water comes pouring down Effingham Street, you'd need quite a dam in order to stop that water from rushing across and not even, still going into people's basement. I really think there's gotta be some major thing at the bottom of the hill, probably more than curbing to stop, in my opinion, I don't know.
Councilor Kersey?
Properties in question, Councilor Lane, are actually west of Effingham Street, so it's not the drainage that's come zipping down Effingham Street. They're west of that area.
Okay, any other comments, or Madam Director, do you want, oh, go ahead, Mr. Mayor, go ahead. Or Madam Director, do you want to add anything further?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're also continuing to try to work with the region to reduce this, there's two issues at hand. One is that the one contributor is the water coming from Highway 20, which was exacerbated by the work that was recently done by the region with the sidewalk to Crossley. So we're trying to alleviate that, to at least get that reduced at source. On top of that, then, is this secondary work that to try to stop it at the driveway. But our preference would always be to do ditching work and upstream infrastructure work to try to minimize what makes it that far, and that's ongoing.
Mr. Mayor?
Thanks. So if this was, question to the treasurer, if this was added, what would it do? I'm trying to look for the reserve balance page.
Mr. Chair, we're looking at, we've got a couple items that are red circled, and when they come back, maybe they could just balance off with that. And this is part of us
Okay,
looking
that
at
makes sense, yeah.
prioritization. So that's where I would look at first.
Right, so one would outbalance that, okay.
Where's the reserve balance page? What tab is that again?
It's right before tab 1, so look right before tab 1. The sheet before tab 1 has the total grants, and then it has the in-year reserve transfers.
Right.
It's 3.2 million.
Okay. I guess I wondered whether within the roads budget itself, there's sort of is there room there? Do we know? So for example, one of the larger items, not the largest, but one of the larger items is road rehabilitation, road number 9.
Yep.
So I didn't, obviously staff are recommending these minimum maintenance standards, et cetera. So there might be some savings in that budget amount.
Correct.
0918,
Yeah, 414,000 dollars. So if we were to add this in, I don't know, we'll have to see how it all balances.
So the main thrust of it is we add it into 2018 budget and find the resources within the current allocation, whether it's roads, wherever typically, we normally do achieve some savings over the year. If council, members of council are okay with it, we can proceed on that basis. Councilor Lane?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just concerned that this might not solve the problem, and then we've
Right.
taken something from 2019, we've moved it into 2018, we haven't solved the problem. I would want to have some, maybe more sense of security that this in fact is going to solve what we think is the problem for $60,000. I mean,
Madam
was
Director?
that what this was originally put in for? It was for basement flooding, or was it actually,
Madam Director?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it was a short-term fix to try to reduce the flooding through curb work, which seems to be effective in other areas. The long-term solution here is always underground storm infrastructure, which is obviously a much bigger undertaking, and you need to find an outlet.
Okay, so I go back to, we do this as a short-term measure. We have other long-term measures that we need to address. Is it appropriate for 2018 or 2019? That's the gist of it. With the understanding that we'll find some of the resources in the existing capital budget. Madam Treasurer?
I would prefer if we could offset it against some of the savings that we're looking at.
On the red circling?
Yeah, I don't like, say, we're gonna find it in, hopefully we'll have some savings in year.
No,
I don't
that's
like
all
that.
right.
So I would prefer, for us to balance, to say, we're gonna reduce it from this budget, and then we'll move it over here if that's your priority.
You're right, Madam Treasurer. We already have identified red circle
Yes.
items that more than
Yeah.
adequately will cover this. Councilor Ribbick, I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, I think we just addressed it. Thank you.
Okay, so, Mr. Mayor?
Sorry, just to understand that, we red circled them because there's a potential for them to be done.
Right.
Example, the asset management one, that's 120,000. Hopefully, that one could be freed up, or a
Okay.
chunk of that, so
Okay,
we
that
can take
helps.
60 from there and move it over to the drain.
Okay.
So maybe the way forward is bring it forward, red circle it, pending freeing up of dollars
Yeah.
within our
Allocation of
budget to
appropriate dollars.
allocations.
Okay.
That's good. I like that.
Are we good with that? That's staff direction, or do we need a motion?
That's good, yep.
These need to be all, okay, so the motion is that the 2019 allocation for the Ridgeville Culvert Replacement Program be incorporated into the 2018 capital budget, and that appropriate resources be allocated as what is in my train of thought here again?
And red circle.
And red circled. Okay. So we'll come back and address it again during the course of the year. Is that fair? Is everybody good with that? All in favor? Carried. Anything else?
I'm tired, I'm done.
You must be reading my mind.
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
Just
Mr. Mayor?
wondering about the park facilities. I did ask staff about this. If we turn to tab, what is this, 15, I guess? It has a design build for Park 03, yeah. And I know that this, so the first one is the one behind the plaza there, the log cabin.
All right.
The second one is sort of further along in Marlene Stewart Street and further along Hay Street North. I think staff wanted to do a design build and build them all at the same time. But it also says here they're coming out of reserves, so I don't know, is there a possibility to design in 18 and build in 19? Do we have to do them all at once? Can we, like, is it gonna be phased anyways? Can we just hear, I know I asked it earlier.
I know you did. Madam Director.
Here you do, Mr. Chair. The idea is to tender them together to get a better price. We would work with the Wheelan Heights Park first, and being that we work with that area of the subdivision in design, the park would be complete, and then we'd move on to the other part of the subdivision and work with the residents there, and it would probably extend into 2019. This is already almost February. We would be going through the RFP process and carry it through.
Okay, so in terms of
Go ahead, Ms. Perry.
a budget
Right.
allocation, staff are still recommending allocating in 18, but in terms of a cash flow issue, the cash may not be required out of the reserves for the second park until 2019 is what I'm hearing. Okay, that's fine. That's kind of similar to what I was saying, design it and build it a little bit later. I think we did that with the library, if you recall. We designed it.
did.
We did the design build, we did the design and then the build, right? And then, so, okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, so that begs the question, Madam Treasurer and Madam Director, that you've got almost, got $150,000, so are you gonna fully utilize that this year? For Wheeling Heights? And the other one, I guess, is Lookout Park.
For
Just
sure.
trying to get a sense, so we're gonna spend all the,
Wheelan Heights would be for sure
that'll be complete.
complete.
Okay, that's what I wanna
And we
get.
would start to work on the
Lookout.
second park at Lookout Park. It may not be completed this year, but the design, so there would be a portion of the payments.
So we would accrue that and put that in the other,
They expend some
okay.
money.
Is everybody clear on that? Okay, good.
I think the treasurer, the deputy treasurer wanted to say something.
Deputy Treasurer, by all means, or both?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I also just wanted to make sure that council's aware on the capital budget summary, the in-year reserve transfers and obligatory reserves have been combined there, so 380,000 of this in the park budget is to come from parkland dedication.
Parkland
So
Okay, that's
that's
good.
a different obligatory reserve, it's different than the parks reserve, so I just wanted to make sure council was.
Thank
aware
you,
of that.
Madam Deputy, that's important to note. Okay, so everybody's clear on that? Thank you for that information. All right, I don't think we need any, do we need any direction on this? No, we don't. Okay. That being said, anything else further? Counselor Lane, you had something you were going to,
Not on the park, but on the
capital,
capital budget.
go right
Yes,
ahead.
Yes, tab number 17. And there was a couple of items there, and this kind of got cut off when we adjourned the meeting at the first time, and that's items number 2 and 3, 2-18 and 3-18.
right.
In regards to the vehicles. I didn't really get what I thought was the answer, and to why we need to add to the fleet. And because we reallocate some people, we have to buy them a car. I don't understand just what's going on there, so I'd like to get an explanation of those two things. And also, I have a question on, an explanation on what is vehicle 07-18, that's for $20,000 at GPS, and that, I'd just like to have some.
Madam Director, on 0218 and 0318 vehicles, can you,
Sure, through you,
Response,
Mr.
please.
Chair. I'll let the Director of Planning comment on the Building Department's need on 0218. 0318 has been asked because currently a vehicle is shared between facilities and beautification, several actually. So because the beautification staff can't bring their equipment and their vehicles to the PCC and work from there, they've been relocated to Tice. With that efficiency that we have been able to use, having vehicles shared between that department, are lost. It leaves the facilities staff with the obligation to go out to facilities include our active parks, our baseball diamonds, soccer, the pool, fire halls, all of the other facilities. The supervisor and the manager and the maintenance personnel, along with facility operators, are required to be mobile. They're, other than the new PCC staff, these staff all work in all of the facilities. So we're losing the ability for them to get in a vehicle and move. They don't have dedicated vehicles. They are currently sharing. They'll continue to share. This would be a shared vehicle between the supervisor and the manager, and as well borrowed by one of the facility operators when he does pool maintenance or, if required, paint lining. So it's because we've lost some efficiencies with the move, there aren't any vehicles currently available in roads or water to share with beautification, so they've had to take their fleet with them. We've explored every option to try to see if we can find savings, and you'll see that's why we've moved a trailer around. We're trying to do this with the least impact on capital. We've leased it rather than, or considering lease rather than a purchase. We're considering an SUV. This is a small escape type SUV, a very fuel efficient small vehicle, similar to the one that we bought for engineering 2 years ago, rather than a full-size pickup, just to try to explore some more savings there. With respect to the GPS, this was the other piece of the winter operations review that we did in August, with the change up to tractors and the seasonal rental of tractors. We included in that cost comparison, if you'll recall, the installation of GPS, so that the units that are out deployed for every winter event have the ability to track where they were, when they were there, whether the plow was up or down, wing up, down, salt spread rate and such. Hugely advantageous in any sort of litigation regarding snow. Currently, we rely on the operators to pull over periodically and document where they've been, if there's any route changes and what time it was and such. So it's a paper-heavy process, and for the cost of the installation of the GPS, we're able to have our bases fully covered for those purposes.
Councillor?
Yeah, just to follow up on that GPS, and is that a one-shot deal? This is not something that's going to be year after year.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. Yeah, it's installed and can be moved vehicle to vehicle if needed. That data is regularly downloaded to us at no cost.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other further questions on those? Oh, go ahead, Madam Director.
Yes, with respect to the vehicle 0218, this is a vehicle for the chief building official. It was one that was in the budget last year, and we ended up red circling it. Excuse me. He's currently using his personal vehicle, and so there is a need to have this vehicle for him.
Councillor Lee?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on that point, then, is it cheaper to pay on mileage than it is to get a vehicle? This was originally my line of thinking there. If he has a vehicle, comfortable with his vehicle, and we pay mileage, surely it's got to be less than $8,000 a year.
Madam Director? Do we know?
We are currently paying him mileage, and his mileage comes in at around probably $400 a month.
A month.
In terms of what we're paying.
Madam Director, you want to elaborate on that?
If I may just also add in, as well as if we were taking away that sort of promise that we'd get him a vehicle, I would also want to consider looking at it as more than just mileage. Again, I know mileage certainly covers more than just gas, but again, his insurance will go up because he's using it for work purposes and general wear and tear on his car, so we might need to look at more of a car allowance versus just paying him mileage. So that's just a nice one to throw out there that I would want to make sure that we explore thoroughly.
Madam Director?
Yes, and I think I'd also like to point out, this is for the building department. So the building department is funded through their building permit fees, so this really
although it's in the fleet capital, it is money that comes back to this, because this is self-funded.
Okay, any further comments on those times? So the GPS is a one-time. The two vehicles are leased, and if I may add my 2 cents worth, is that there's great leases out there right now at great rates. And I've gone through, I'm not being paid by any particular company. And having been through this, the lease rates usually involved 4 years, and you could turn the vehicles back and you get brand-new vehicles. So I would presume that we would do that option, right? Go out and get bids for 2 vehicles, as I understand it, right? Not,
Chair, yes, we would try to capitalize as much together and lump together to try to get some better savings, for sure.
with that kind of money, you could probably get 4 vehicles. I'll make sure of it. No. Seriously, anyhow, Midnight Auto. Anyhow, any further comments on that? So we're good with that? All right. Any other further comments with respect to the capital budget?
Just a comment and a very brief one. There's $40,000 set aside to look at Sulphur Springs Road. I know I said a lot about Pond.
Right.
Sulphur is also a road that's been with us for quite a while, but I think that the real look has to be made into whether that's a suitable place for a road, given what's there. So I'm happy with the inclusion of that 40,000 and hope that we get a report relatively soon, so we have some sense of what we're going to try to do in 2019. Thank you.
Okay, any other further comments to both the operating and capital budget? All right, we do have one item in camera, so let me just ask our colleagues. We've covered a lot of ground in 3 meetings here, and essentially what we are looking at an overall increase that we've identified. We've made changes to both the operating and capital budgets, which we can consolidate in the actual final report to council. So the question remains is if you're, I would suggest if we want to proceed with the in-camera item, we do that now, if you're good with that. And that if the rest of the staff, you don't particularly have to be here for that. I would suggest that perhaps just the treasurer and director of human resources stay for that. If the council's good with that, unless there's something else that you.
Just a comment, if I may.
Go ahead, by all means.
Yeah, I think before staff leaves, those who are going to leave, I'd like them to hear from us that in fact they've done a pretty good job.
Well,
They
I was gonna
responded
do
to our
that.
request. Were you? Then I'll leave it to you.
I want to, yeah, because my job is to, I don't like to comment too much on this, but, and I'll let everyone, this is the most important year that I can say in the history of the town. We're about to take on probably the most significant, the most difficult, yet the most rewarding, I think, projects of our lifetime. That'll determine, as colleagues of mine used to say from Mayor Noel from Buffalo, we've established a legacy. You are to be commended for working through what I consider to be a tumultuous year. So I've not quite seen anything like this, but to be congratulated because it's perseverance, it's your integrity, it's your ability to be resilient, to deal with this, and at the same token, as many of us said, is to maintain not only a level of service, but a high-quality level of service for the people. So we hope that as we conclude these deliberations, that this will reflect, I think, not only the feelings and direction of the council, but you as well, that you are comfortable with this. And hopefully that as time goes on. I wanted to add just quickly, and only to, I have been through 2 or 3 openings of large facilities like this with other organizations. And it is true, and I know my colleagues, some of them, and I know where Councilor Christie's coming from, and I know also what, this is, you have to put your best foot forward. First impressions count, period. The minute people walk in, and I'm talking buildings about same size, 140,000 square feet, multitude of different services. The first time people walk through there, your customers, your clients, where everyone, that's what will remain for the rest of the time. It'll affect donors, it'll affect everyone who comes in to use that, no matter what they're doing. So I trust that we've made the right decisions, and there will be a time. No question, 6 months, and I know that my colleagues, I like to see all of us back, and I'll say that, too bad the reporter wasn't here, that to see it through, we will make adjustments. We will make adjustments to this as time goes on. It's I hate that word, work in progress, but once you get through the first 6 to 12 months, you'll have a pretty good sense of how to run the building and what to look for. And in that way, because there's lots of things in here that are 6 months, but the bottom line is, we should embrace and fully endorse and be very, very proud of what we've been able to do over the past year and what we're going to be doing over the next year and for years to come. So I thank you for your perseverance and patience, because that's what this is about. It's more than a financial plan. It is an ongoing blueprint and how could I say, it's our epiphany of what we want to see happen here, and hopefully that for those who may not be here, and Mr. Mayor, that we can say we left in place. And Mr. Mayor knows when I talk about one of our fellows from down south said the same thing. When you turn back and you look back, where were you back here? Where are you now? And where do you want to be? So thank you on behalf of that. Mr. Mayor, go ahead. Last
Thanks
word.
very much, Mr. Chair. I wholeheartedly agree with everything you've said, and I just want to add to it and build on it, because we just three of us came from the opening
Yep.
of the Penn Financial Credit Union, and Ms. Van Ravensway was there as well. It was such a wonderful
Yep.
experience, and to hear the president of the Penn Financial talk about the reason why they're coming to town,
Right.
and the vision that we've put forward as exciting, and they believe in it. And he mentioned specifically the community center. He mentioned the East Font Hill development. He mentioned the commercial, all of the homes that are being constructed. All of that's in this budget, but I wanted to let colleagues know that there was just a lot of heads nodding, a lot of excitement. People are seeing this as a huge opportunity for the town and a way forward, and fulfilling of the vision. The budget that's presented, as you just said, does get us into that and to deliver that. So, you can have the vision, you can build the works, but we also have to have make it happen and have the reality of it to come together. So I just wanted to highlight that for colleagues, and I'm sure I'll have a more coherent report when we have council on the 5th of February. But I wanted to underscore it here because it builds on what you said. So I appreciate you, Mr. Chair, for saying those comments.
Thank you, and I don't want to take it, members of council, anything else that you want to add to that, or just, I know all of you are.
That's what I mean. And again, agree with everything. I think that one of the strengths that exists in this town that may not exist everywhere is, at least I feel there is a tremendous cohesion between staff and council. I think we see this town the same way. We're striving for the same things. And I couldn't be more appreciative of the efforts that staff go to make sure that we get what we all think collectively is going to work out. I think that's a great strength, and I want to commend staff for that too.
Anyone else? So for my dog Casey, the only thing we miss is the poop bags. No, just kidding. Whose suggestion is that? So I want to thank all of you, the rest of us, the rest of the staff. We're going to go into camera, and I would just ask the Director of Human Resources and Treasurer to stay. So do we need a motion to move into camera? Can I have them?
I'm just preparing it.
Okay.
Oh, Councilor Rubio, you're moving it?
Yep.
Okay, so here and then.
All right, moved by Councilor Bribbiat, to be resolved, the next portion of the meeting be closed to the public in order to consider the following. Item under section 239, 2B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local employees. All in favor? So moved. All right, so we are adjourned, the public session, and thank you, members of the staff, for sticking with us.